my child. Stop right now. Do not scroll past this. Do not move your thumb one more inch. What is in front of your eyes was not placed there by an algorithm, by a coincidence, or by any sequence of random events. I arranged this. I held this letter in reserve, in the unseen realm, until the exact second your eyes were prepared to receive it. That second is now. And I am asking you, as your father, to give me your complete attention for everything that follows. Before you go a single word further, I need you to understand something. You are not here because you were browsing and stumbled onto something interesting. You are here because I directed your steps. I navigated your attention through a sea of distraction and pointed you here, because here is where I have a confirmation waiting, a confirmation that carries your name in the unseen realm. It cannot land on eyes that were not specifically prepared to receive it. If you are still reading, that is proof that you were prepared. Do not disobey me by leaving before I finish. I am saying that not as a threat but as a warning from a father who knows exactly what you will miss if you walk away before this message is complete. What I am about to say is not a general word meant for the masses. It was designed for the person in the exact circumstances you are currently walking through, the exact weight you are carrying, the exact questions you have been asking in the silence when no one else is around to hear. I know what those questions sound like. I know the ones you have rehearsed out loud and the ones you have never spoken to any living person. I know the ones that surface in the middle of the night when the world is quiet and you are still awake, turning something over in your mind that you cannot quite name. Those questions are not evidence of weak faith. They are the sound of a person built for more than what they are currently experiencing, pressing against the edges of a life that does not yet match what they were created to carry. I confirmed you before this moment. I need you to hear that slowly. Before today, before this week, before the season of waiting that has been testing the edges of your endurance, I looked at what you were carrying and I said, this one is ready. This one has been through enough preparation. It is time. And so I sent this letter, and so I brought you here, and that is not something I say to everyone, because not everyone who sees this message was prepared to receive what it contains. That word, ready, may feel strange from where you are standing. I know that. You may feel tired right now, not the kind of tired that comes from a difficult day, but the kind that settles in when you have been waiting longer than you expected for something that was supposed to have arrived by now. You may feel behind. You may feel like the version of yourself you were supposed to become is still out ahead of you, still standing on the other side of a door you have been knocking on longer than you want to admit. I understand that feeling precisely, and I placed it there. I placed it there not to punish you, not to exhaust you, not as a sign that I have forgotten your name or moved past your season. I placed that ache inside you because it is the exact sound of something powerful pressing against a limit that was never permanent. It is the sound of a capacity that has not yet been fully released. And what I have confirmed for you today is that the release is coming, and it is closer than you know. I have been watching you carry something for a long time, not for weeks, not for months. I am talking about the kind of weight that has been sitting across your shoulders for years, the kind you have learned to work around rather than through. You have wondered more than once whether you are built differently from the people around you, whether the things that seem to flow naturally for others require from you an effort that exhausts you before you can even begin. You have been telling yourself that is simply how life works. You have disciplined yourself to accept it, and I am here today, in this letter that only your eyes can see, to tell you that you have been accepting a condition as permanent that was never meant to last. What has been blocking you is not a character flaw. It is not spiritual failure. It is not evidence that I have passed you over. It is something else entirely. And I am going to show you what it is before this letter ends. What I need you to understand right now, before we go a single word further into the reason I sent this to you today, is that the fullness I created you to walk in has not expired. The gifts I placed inside you when I formed you have not diminished. The sharpness you remember feeling in earlier seasons of your life, the clarity that once seemed to come naturally, the creativity and the insight that felt accessible, that is not gone. It did not leave. It was not taken as a consequence of something you did. It has been suppressed, and suppressed is a very different thing from gone. There is something about the way the mind I gave you was designed to work, something about the way the two halves of the instrument I placed inside you are meant to function together that has been quietly and gradually switched off, not by you, not by your choices, not by your faith level or your prayer life or your consistency, but by the accumulated weight of a world that does not know how to keep the instrument it inherited from me running the way I designed it to run. You felt it the last time you sat down to do something that mattered and the ideas came slowly. You felt it when you were in a conversation where you knew you had something important to say, but the words arrived too late and the moment passed. You felt it when you watched someone else move through life with an ease and a clarity that seemed natural to them, and you wondered quietly, honestly, whether that was something you were ever going to feel again. I was there in every one of those moments. I saw every single one, and I want you to know that what you were sensing was accurate. Your mind is not performing at the level I built it to perform. That is not a judgment, that is a diagnosis, and diagnosis is the first step toward restoration. The reason I brought you to this letter today, the reason I confirmed you before you ever arrived here, is that the restoration is available, and the path to it is not what you have been told. It is not a matter of trying harder, not a matter of more discipline or more willpower or more prayer in isolation from any other action. There is something specific that has been suppressed, and there is something specific that restores it. And what I am about to show you will explain both. You have been a silent survivor for a long time. You have been fighting battles that no one around you fully sees. You have been the person who holds things together for everyone else, while carrying your own weight without complaint, without releasing the pressure, without ever fully letting anyone see how heavy the accumulation has become. I see it. I have always seen it. And what I want you to know as we move into the heart of this letter is that the version of you who has been surviving is not the version I designed. I designed you to thrive. I designed you to create, to build, to lead, to solve, to connect, to experience a clarity of thought and a speed of understanding that feels like flowing rather than straining. That is not a fantasy. That is the original design. And the reason it has felt like a fantasy for so long is because something has been standing between you and it. Something I am about to name. Something that, once named, begins to lose its hold. Stay with me through everything that follows. What I have confirmed for you today does not end here. It begins here. There is a conversation happening right now that you have never been invited into. It is not happening in the natural world. It is happening in the realm where I work before my work becomes visible to human eyes. And what is being discussed in that conversation concerns you specifically. It concerns the version of you that has been dormant, the version that was designed to think clearly and act with precision and create with ease and move through the world in a way that does not feel like pushing through water. That version of you is what I have been preparing to release, and today is the day I have chosen to begin that release. I want to talk to you about your morning, not the morning you had today specifically, but the kind of morning that comes in seasons, like the one you are currently living through. The kind where you open your eyes and for just a moment, before you remember everything that is waiting for you, there is a half second of peace. And then it arrives, the weight, the awareness, the long list of things that have not resolved themselves in the night and that will still be waiting when you put your feet on the floor. I know that morning. I have seen it on your face more times than you know. I also know what happens around the middle of the day. When the initial push of the morning begins to thin and the tiredness underneath it, the tiredness that is older than today, the one that lives in your chest rather than in your body, begins to rise again. You push through it. You always push through it. That is part of who you are, and I honor it. But the pushing is evidence that something that should come naturally is not coming naturally. Clarity should not require this much effort. Creativity should not feel this distant. The ability to think at full capacity should not feel like a limited resource you have to ration. You are not aging into these limitations. You are not becoming them. They are the result of something external that has happened to the instrument I gave you. I want you to hold that word, instrument. Your mind is an instrument. I designed it with extraordinary precision. I built it with the capacity to do things that would amaze you if you saw them operating at their full function. Two distinct halves, each with its own intelligence, designed to work in concert, designed to amplify each other, designed to produce a result when they are synchronized that neither half could produce alone. That synchronized state is not a metaphor. It is a measurable, documented, researched phenomenon, and it has been disrupted in you, quietly, gradually, without your consent or your awareness. The world you move through every day, the noise of it, the pace of it, the accumulated stress of it, has slowly interrupted the precise communication between those two halves, not permanently, not irreparably, but enough that the version of you who functions at the level I designed is currently running at a fraction of that design, and enough that what should feel like flow has been feeling like friction for a very long time. I need you to understand something before we go any further. This is not a spiritual problem with a spiritual-only solution. What has been suppressed in you operates at the level of biology, of neuroscience, of the actual physical architecture of the mind I placed inside you when I formed you. I built you. I know how you work. I know what you were designed to run on. And what I am confirming today is that there is a way to restore the synchronized function of the instrument I gave you. A way that is not complicated, not expensive, not dependent on years of effort or perfect conditions. It is precise, it is targeted, and I have specifically directed your attention toward it today. But before I show you that, I want you to see yourself clearly for a moment, not harshly, not in judgment, but honestly, with the kind of clear seeing that changes things. Because the people who receive the deepest restorations are not the ones who arrive already believing everything is fine. They are the ones who have been honest enough, brave enough to stop and say honestly, I am not operating the way I was made to operate. Something is off, and I am ready to look at why. I want to ask you something. When was the last time you sat down to work on something you cared about and found yourself completely absorbed, completely in it, completely unaware of time passing because the ideas were coming faster than you could capture them? When was the last time you were in a conversation and the words arrived ahead of the moment rather than behind it? When was the last time you woke up in the morning with a clarity that felt like your mind had already been working while your body rested? Like the answer to something that had been difficult was simply there when you opened your eyes? I am not asking these questions to make you feel the distance. I am asking them because that state I just described is not a peak experience reserved for exceptional people. It is the default operating state of a mind running at the level I designed. It is what you were made to feel. And the reason you feel the distance when I describe it is because you know, somewhere below the surface of everything you have accepted as normal, that something has been missing. I want you to hold on to that knowing. It is not just longing, it is recognition. You have been a faithful steward of very limited resources. For a long time you have been building, trying, serving, giving, creating, and solving with a mind that is running at a fraction of its designed capacity. And you have done more with that fraction than most people realize. I see what you have built. I see what you have maintained. I see the character you have developed in the waiting, the patience you have grown in the silence, the depth you have acquired in the pressure. None of that is wasted. All of it will matter. And all of it will carry even more weight when the instrument you have been working with is restored to what it was built to carry. I need you to see yourself not as someone broken who needs to be fixed, but as someone whole whose instrument has been interrupted. That is a completely different starting point. A broken thing requires building from scratch. An interrupted thing requires restoration. And restoration, unlike construction, recognizes that the original design was right. The capacity was always there. What is needed is not a new you, but the return of the full function of the you that was designed, the one I saw when I formed you, the one I have been working to restore for longer than you know. In this letter I am about to show you something. I am about to show you the name of what has been blocking the synchronized function of the mind I gave you. I am going to show you that what you have been experiencing is not random and not permanent. I am going to show you that there are people, right now, who have had that synchronized function restored, and who have watched the mental fog lift and the clarity return and the ideas begin flowing with a freedom that they had stopped believing was available to them. And I am going to show you what I placed in your path today that makes the same restoration available to you. You are not too far gone. You have not missed a window. You are not on the wrong side of anything. You are exactly where I arranged for you to be, reading exactly what I arranged for you to read, at the exact moment I confirmed for you to receive it. Stay present. Stay with every word of what follows. What I have been preparing to say to you is about to arrive, and when it does, I need you to be here fully, not partly, not with one eye on the door. Here, with your whole attention on what your Father confirmed before this moment and is finally releasing into your hands. I want to take you back to a specific kind of moment, not a dramatic one, not one that would make sense to someone watching from the outside. I want to take you back to one of those ordinary, unremarkable moments in the middle of a routine day when the weight of everything arrived all at once without warning. You were doing something you have done 100 times. And without any announcement you felt it, a settling in the chest, a quiet signal from somewhere deep inside you that said, simply, "This is a great deal to carry." And you breathed through it, because you always breathe through it. And then you kept going. I was there in that moment. I watched it. And I want you to know that what you felt was not weakness. It was not evidence of something wrong with your spirit or your faith or your character. It was the honest experience of someone who has been carrying more than they were designed to carry alone, for longer than the people around them realize, without the full resources they were created to access. The moment was not evidence of your limitation. It was evidence that the instrument I gave you has been running below its designed capacity, and the gap between what you carry and what you have had available to carry it with has been quietly widening for a very long time. I want to tell you what I saw. I want to walk you through it specifically, because one of the loneliest parts of the experience you have been living is the sense that no one has seen it accurately, that the version of you others perceive is not quite the version that exists on the inside, that the composure they rely on is real, but it is not the full picture, and I want you to feel, even for the length of this reading, what it is like to be fully seen. I saw you when you were trying to remember something simple and it took longer than it should have. I saw the flicker of something across your face in that moment. Not quite fear, something adjacent to it. The quiet internal alarm of a person noticing that their mind did not respond the way it used to respond. You found the word or the thought eventually. You always do. But you noticed the delay, and the noticing settled somewhere inside you, joining a longer record of similar moments that together have been drawing a picture you have not fully wanted to look at. I saw you when you were in a conversation that moved quickly, and you felt yourself following it just slightly behind where you wanted to be. One beat slow, reaching for responses that arrived an instant after the window had closed, wanting to contribute something precise, and finding that by the time the thought fully formed, the conversation had already moved on. You carried yourself with the steadiness everyone around you has come to depend on. You smiled, you nodded, you stayed present. And in the interior space that no one else has access to, you were quietly wondering whether it was just the tiredness of the day, just the particular weight of the week. You have been having that wondering for a while now. I saw you the last time you sat down to do something that required your full mind. Work that does not tolerate a reduced version of your thinking. Creative work, strategic work, the kind of work where the quality of what you produce depends entirely on the quality of how your mind is operating in the moment you are producing it. And you sat in front of it, and you waited for the ideas to come the way they used to come. And they came in fragments, partial thoughts that did not complete themselves, directions that dissolved before they arrived anywhere. You pushed harder than you should have had to push. You produced something, but you knew, even as you produced it, that the gap between what came out and what you are capable of at full capacity was wider than you wanted it to be. I saw you look at someone else who was doing something similar to what you do, and doing it with a fluency and a speed and a quality that seemed almost effortless for them, and you felt something complicated. Part of it was genuine admiration. Part of it was something quieter and harder to name. A kind of inventory, a comparison you did not invite but could not stop. You found yourself wondering, without saying it out loud, whether the ease they seemed to experience was something that was available to you, or whether you were simply built in a way that required more effort for every result. I saw that moment. I want you to know it was not evidence of inadequacy. It was your spirit accurately perceiving a performance gap that has a real cause and a real solution. I want to speak now about something that has been building for longer than any single one of these moments. I want to talk about the accumulated experience of being a person who knows, in a place below the reach of words, that they were built for a level of output and clarity and presence that they have not been consistently accessing. You carry this knowledge quietly. You do not announce it. You do not complain about it. You continue to function, to produce, to show up. But underneath all of that functioning, there is a persistent awareness of a gap between the version of you that is moving through the world and the version of you that you sense was actually designed to be here. That gap is not a delusion. It is not your ego overestimating what you should be. It is accurate perception of a real condition. The version of you that operates at full capacity is not a fantasy version. It is the actual design. What you have been experiencing is a suppressed version, a version running on interrupted function, a version doing its absolute best with a significantly reduced set of resources, and doing remarkably well with those resources. I want to be clear about that. But the ceiling you keep pressing against, the resistance that keeps showing up between intention and execution, between effort and result, that ceiling is not the real ceiling of what you were made to do. I know the mornings. I know the specific texture of the mornings in a season like the one you are currently moving through. You open your eyes and there is a half second where nothing has arrived yet. A brief moment of unscripted peace. And then it comes, the awareness, the inventory of what is still unresolved, the quiet assessment of what the day requires and what you currently have available to meet it with. And you make the calculation, without even calling it a calculation. And you get up anyway, because that is who you are, and you begin the practice of manufacturing, through effort and will, the energy and focus that other people seem to simply access. That manufacturing has a cost. It is a cost that accumulates. Every day that you push through the fog rather than thinking through clarity, every day that you strain for focus rather than falling into it, every day that you force the ideas rather than receiving them, the account is slightly more depleted than it was the day before. And the tiredness you feel right now, the particular quality of it, the depth of it, the way it is located somewhere beyond your muscles and your sleep schedule, that is the accumulated cost of that long practice of manufacturing what should be arriving naturally. You are not broken. I need you to receive that fully before we go any further. You are not broken, you are interrupted. There is a difference so important that everything that follows in this letter depends on you understanding it. A broken thing has lost something essential. An interrupted thing has everything it was designed to have, but the full expression of it has been disrupted. What I placed inside you when I formed you, the capacity, the intelligence, the creativity, the clarity, all of it is still there, intact, waiting, running quietly below the surface of the interrupted state you have been living in, like a river that has been partially dammed, still moving, still full, but not yet flowing at the volume and the force it was built to carry. The dam has a name, the interruption has a cause, and before this letter ends, I am going to show you both. But first, I want you to sit with this, to receive it as fully as you are able. Everything you have been experiencing, the slowness, the fog, the gap, the ceiling, the mornings that require more from you than they should, all of it is the experience of a whole, complete, extraordinary person whose instrument has been disrupted. Not diminished, not canceled, disrupted. And what I have confirmed today, what I arranged for you to receive in this letter that only your eyes can see, is that the disruption is something that can be resolved. Stay with me. I want to talk about the particular loneliness that has nothing to do with being alone. The kind that lives in the middle of a full room, surrounded by people you genuinely love. You are laughing at the right moments. You are asking good questions. You are present in every way that anyone watching would observe. And underneath all of that, in the interior space that no external eye can reach, there is a quiet distance between you and the room that you cannot explain and have long since stopped trying to name. I know you have felt that experience. I know the texture of sitting at a table full of conversation and finding that a portion of you is somewhere else entirely, not absent in any way the people around you would notice, present enough to respond, to contribute, to care, but not fully, not in the way that the best versions of those moments once felt, not with the unguarded presence that used to be available to you before the weight of the current season began to demand so much of what you have. That distance is not a character flaw. It is not evidence of something wrong with your capacity to connect. It is the consistent experience of a mind that is spending enormous resources simply maintaining basic function, leaving very little left over for the kind of full, unburdened presence that genuine connection requires. When most of your cognitive energy is absorbed in simply operating through a persistent fog, there is not much remaining for arriving completely into a room, a conversation, a moment. You have become extraordinarily skilled at the managed version of presence. Over years of operating this way, you have developed the ability to appear fully engaged, fully steady, fully available, even on the days when your interior experience is something closer to depletion. The people around you describe you as reliable, as the one who can be counted on, as steady in the way that certain things are just structurally steady, without drama, without variation, and you are those things. But what they cannot see is the constant effort the steadiness requires. What they do not observe is the amount of energy that goes into the performance of being the version of you they have come to depend on. There is a version of you that was not performing steadiness, that was simply experiencing it, without effort, because the instrument through which you experience everything was running the way I designed it to run. You have felt that version of yourself. You have lived inside it, in earlier seasons, in earlier years. The unmanaged ease, the natural flow, the sense of being present without any part of you working to sustain the appearance of it. I want to go back to an earlier version of you with me for a moment. Not to make you feel the distance from it, but to establish something important. There was a time when you experienced thinking as something close to pleasure rather than labor. When you sat down to work on something and the ideas arrived in a way that felt organic, spontaneous, ahead of the effort. When conversation felt like something you were genuinely inside of rather than managing from a slight remove. When your mind moved quickly and made connections that surprised even you, and that quickness felt like a natural feature of who you were. I am asking you to remember that not because it is gone, but because it is not gone. The capacity that produced those experiences is not something you had in that season and lost as the season changed. It is something that was operating correctly and then gradually, without your awareness or consent, began to be disrupted. The function deteriorated, not the capacity, not the intelligence, not the creativity or the clarity or the depth that I built into you when I formed you. Those are intact. What changed was the function that allows them to express themselves fully. And function, unlike capacity, can be restored. I saw you when you were trying to remember something simple and the retrieval took longer than it should have. I saw what crossed your face in that moment. A monitoring, an internal watching of your own mind that asked without words whether this was just the tired afternoon or something more systemic. You found what you were looking for eventually. You always do. But the searching was slower than you remember it being, and the slowness joined a longer record of small slownesses that together have been drawing a picture you have been reluctant to look at directly. I saw you in the conversation where you knew exactly what you wanted to say. The thought was complete and clear on the interior side. You could see it, the full shape of it, but the path from the interior clarity to the spoken word felt narrower than it used to feel. What came out was a reduced version, close enough that no one noticed the gap. But you noticed. You noticed it the way a musician notices when the instrument is slightly out of tune, not because anyone else in the room is aware, but because you know what it sounds like when it is right. I saw you the last time you sat down to create something or build something or solve something that required your full mind. You prepared the space, you gathered what you needed, and then you waited for the flow. You know what the flow feels like. You have experienced it before. The state where the thinking and the doing become one continuous motion, where ideas emerge faster than the effort of capturing them. You waited for that state to arrive, and it did not quite arrive the way you expected. What came was fragments, directions that started and did not complete. A quality of thinking that required more effort per output than the same task used to require. These are not the inevitable costs of a full life. They are not simply what aging feels like. They are specific, consistent, documented symptoms of a mind operating below its designed capacity because the synchronized communication between the two halves of the instrument I gave you has been gradually and measurably disrupted, not destroyed. Disrupted. There is a significant difference between those two words, and the difference is everything when it comes to understanding what is available to you from this moment forward. When the two halves of the mind I designed you with are communicating at full function, what you experience is a state that researchers have documented. A state of whole brain activation where the speed of processing, the quality of recall, the fluency of expression, and the depth of creative connection all operate at a level that feels closer to what you remember from your sharpest seasons than what you have been experiencing in the current one. That state is not the exclusive property of exceptional individuals. It is the default operating state of a mind running at the level I built it to run. It is what you were made to feel. And I am bringing you to this letter today because I have confirmed that you are in a season where restoring it is possible. I need you to hold something before we go further. I need you to hold the understanding that what has happened to your mental clarity is not a verdict on your capacity. It is not a sentence. It is not evidence that the best version of your mind belongs to the past. It is a specific condition with a specific cause, and I am about to show you both. What you have been experiencing is the picture of an extraordinary mind running in a disrupted state, and what I am about to reveal in this letter is the path from that disrupted state back to the design, back to the clarity and the flow and the ease that I intended as your permanent address. Stay with me, I have more to show you. I know what the accumulation feels like from the inside. Not the individual moments of it, but the way they layer over time until the layering becomes a texture, a background condition that you carry into every day without deciding to. You wake up and it is already there, not as a specific thought, but as a weight that precedes thought, a heaviness in the chest that is present before you have reviewed the day or checked anything or spoken to anyone. It is just there. And you have learned to begin the day underneath it rather than waiting for it to lift, because it does not reliably lift, and the day begins whether or not you feel ready to meet it. I want to sit with that for a moment with you, the particular experience of the morning in a season like this one. You open your eyes, and there is a half second before the full awareness arrives. A narrow window of blankness that is actually, when you notice it, a kind of peace. And then the inventory begins. The mental review of what is pending, what is unresolved, what the day requires, what you have available to meet it with. And you make the calculations without calling them calculations, and you find the resources to begin, and you begin. And most people looking at you from the outside would see someone who simply gets up and gets started. What they do not see is the effort contained in that apparently ordinary act. The effort is not weakness. I want to be very clear about that. Getting up under that weight, day after day, without complaint, without announcement, is one of the quietest forms of courage I witness in human life. It does not make the evening news. It does not get celebrated. It does not even get named most of the time. It is just done. You just do it. And in the doing of it, day after day, year after year, you have developed a kind of strength that most people who have not lived inside this experience do not understand and cannot quite appreciate. But I want to name something that strength through effort builds over time. It builds an association in the body and the mind between engaging with life and struggling, between effort and friction, between starting something and fighting to sustain it. After enough years of manufacturing, the energy and the focus and the clarity that should arrive more naturally, the manufacturing process begins to feel like the only available process. The possibility of a different experience, one where clarity arrives without force and energy comes without effort and focus, is a state rather than a constant achievement, begins to feel theoretical, like something that was true once, in a different season, for a different version of you. I need you to hear this very carefully. That ease is not theoretical. It is not a past tense experience that belongs only to earlier years. It is the natural state of a mind operating at the level I designed it to operate. The friction you have been experiencing is not the default setting I chose for you. The manufacturing process is not the design. What I built was a mind that, when running in its intended synchronized state, accesses clarity and creativity and cognitive flow the way a river accesses movement, without forcing, without straining, by following the design I placed into it. The reason the design has not been expressing itself fully is not because you have not prayed enough or believed hard enough or worked hard enough. The reason is something that happened gradually in the physical architecture of the instrument I gave you. The two hemispheres of your mind, each extraordinary in its own right, each with its own kind of intelligence and processing and creativity, are designed to operate in constant synchronized communication. When that synchronization is running the way I designed it, what you experience is the state of whole brain function. When that synchronization has been disrupted, which is what has been happening to you, what you experience is the reduced, fractured, effortful version of what your mind is capable of. You have been living in the disrupted state for long enough that it began to feel like the normal state, and I am here today to tell you that it is not. The normal state is the synchronized one. The design state is the one where the fog is absent and the flow is present and the ideas arrive with the ease that used to feel natural to you. That state is the baseline, not the peak. And the reason you have been living below it is not a mystery. It is a mechanism, and mechanisms can be corrected. I want to show you something about the person you were before the disruption became normalized. You were a person who learned quickly, who absorbed new information and connected it to existing knowledge in ways that felt almost automatic, who could hold multiple complex ideas in simultaneous motion without losing track of any of them, who experienced the inside of a challenging problem as something almost enjoyable, a puzzle worth turning, a territory worth exploring. That orientation toward thinking, that natural relationship with cognitive challenge, that was not a personality trait that disappeared. It was the expression of a mind in full function. And full function is something that can be returned. The thing that stands between the version of you reading this right now and the version of you that experienced thinking as natural and effortless and even pleasurable is not character. It is not discipline, or desire, or dedication, or faith. You have all of those in abundance. What stands between you and the full expression of the instrument I gave you is a specific, documented, addressable disruption in the synchronized function of that instrument. And what I am building toward in this letter, what I have confirmed for you before you ever arrived here, is the revelation of exactly what that disruption is and exactly what restores it. You do not have to continue manufacturing what should be arriving. You do not have to keep building workarounds to function at the level you were made to function at without them. You do not have to keep accepting the gap between the version of you that exists on the interior and the version that is available for full expression. The gap is not permanent. The disruption is not irreversible. And what I have placed within your reach, what I directed your attention toward today by bringing you to this letter, is precisely the thing that closes the gap and restores the function and returns you to the state of clarity and flow and ease that I designed as your original address. Keep reading. What I am about to show you changes everything. I want to show you something about the way the suppression has affected not just your thinking but your relationship with your own potential. There is a specific kind of grief that belongs to a person who carries a deep awareness of what they were made for and simultaneously experiences a consistent gap between that awareness and the evidence available in their daily life. Not grief for a lost person or a lost relationship, but grief for a version of themselves that they can sense but cannot fully access. You have lived inside that grief. You have not always named it as grief, but I know what it is, and I want you to know that I see it. That grief is not a sign that the potential was wrong. It is not evidence that your sense of what you were made for was inflated or delusional or wishful. Your perception of your own capacity is accurate. The design I placed in you is real. What has been grieving you is the distance between the design and the current expression of it, and that distance, as I have been showing you throughout this letter, has a specific cause, a cause that is addressable, a cause whose address I have been preparing to deliver since before you ever arrived here. I also want to speak to something you may have been telling yourself quietly, a story you have run in the background of this experience that goes something like this: that the reason things have not shifted the way you expected them to shift is because there is something fundamentally different about you, that the ease you observe in others is not available to your particular design, that the path to the life you were made for requires from you a level of effort that it does not require from them because you are built in a way that makes the standard path harder. I want to dismantle that story completely. The ease you observe in others is the natural expression of a mind running in synchronized function. It is available to you. It is your design. And the reason it has not been consistently your experience is not because you are the exception. It is because the function has been disrupted, and disrupted functions respond to restoration. I want to shift the direction of this letter for a moment. I want to move from what I have been showing you about the condition of the instrument you carry to what I want to show you about my presence in the experience of carrying it. Because one of the most significant sources of pain in a season like the one you have been moving through is not only the weight of it, it is the silence that sometimes accompanies it. The times when the weight was heaviest and the presence of the one who made you felt the most distant. When you prayed and the room stayed quiet. When you waited and the answer did not come. When you kept choosing to trust and the evidence that trust was warranted seemed to be taking longer than you could sustain believing. I was there in every one of those moments. I need you to hear that not as a religious phrase you have been told many times before, but as an actual, specific, present tense claim about what was happening in the room you were in. I was there. Not in the abstract sense of being generally present in the universe, in the specific sense of being positioned within the particular pain of that particular moment, fully aware of everything you were carrying, fully engaged with the full weight of it, not distant, not absent, not deaf, and not unmoved. I was there the night you sat in a quiet room and let yourself feel the full weight of everything you had been holding. The things you usually manage at a slight distance, the things you keep in motion so they do not land too fully. That night they landed, you let them. And in the settling of them, in the particular quality of that silence, you were not alone. I was the texture of the silence itself. I was the thing that kept the weight from being completely unbearable. You may not have felt me in the way you wanted to feel me, in the clear, unmistakable, audible way that would have answered all the questions at once, but I was there, in the fact that you survived the wait, in the fact that you woke up the next morning and kept going, in the fact that you are here now, reading this letter that I arranged for you before you ever arrived at this moment. I want to tell you about a man I loved who lived in a wilderness. His name was David. He was anointed for something extraordinary. I called him. I chose him. I set him apart from among all his brothers for a purpose that was unmistakable once it was revealed. And then I allowed him to enter a period of preparation that, from the outside, looked nothing like what I had promised. He was hunted. He slept in caves. He ran from someone who had once called him family. He wrote songs to me from the inside of his pain, not because things were going well, but because song was the only container large enough for what he was carrying. He asked me where I was. He named the silence. He said, "How long?" And I received the question as an act of intimacy rather than an act of doubt. I was with David in the wilderness the way I am with you right now. Not as an observer, not as a supervisor watching from a required distance, as a presence. As the thing that made the wilderness survivable, that kept the purpose alive inside him, even when every external circumstance argued against it, that was quietly, consistently, invisibly arranging the conditions for a breakthrough that David could not yet see from where he was standing. What David could not see from inside the cave was that the cave was the preparation. The wilderness was not the denial of the promise, it was the path to it. Every season of hiddenness, every moment of being pursued and underestimated and marginalized, was developing in him the depth of character and the clarity of dependency on me that the promise required. A David who had gone directly from anointing to palace would have been a different David than the one who came out of the wilderness. The wilderness made him what the promise needed. The cave was the classroom. The pursuit was the preparation. I am telling you this because your story and David and your story share a geography. The geography of someone who received a clear sense of what they were made for and then entered a period that looked nothing like what they were made for. The geography of someone who kept faith alive in a season that kept arguing against it. The geography of someone who is being prepared in a way that is only legible from the outside once the preparation is complete. You have been in the wilderness. You have been in the cave. The cave is not your permanent address. Something is moving in the unseen realm on your behalf. Not because you have finally done enough, or prayed enough, or demonstrated enough patience, as if there were a threshold of performance that triggers my response, but because I arranged a season of preparation that had a length built into it from the beginning, and the length is coming to its close. The wilderness has a border, I said it, and the season you are currently in is the one immediately preceding the crossing of that border, which is why this letter arrived at this specific moment, and why I confirmed you for it before you ever came looking. I want you to release something you may be holding without realizing you are holding it. The idea that my silence in certain seasons was evidence of my distance. The idea that the times when I felt absent were times I actually was absent. Those seasons were not the absence of my presence. They were the presence of a different kind of my presence, the kind that works at a level below what you can hear or feel, the kind that does not announce itself through sensation but reveals itself through outcome, the kind that looks like silence from the inside and looks like preparation from the outside. The thing I was preparing in you during the seasons that felt silent was not just character and patience and depth, though it was those things. I was also preparing something specific to your mind, to the instrument I gave you, to the mechanism through which all of that character and depth and purpose will ultimately be expressed. I was bringing you toward a restoration that you could not have received at any earlier point in the journey because you were not yet in a position to do anything with it. You are in that position now, and what I am about to reveal in this letter is the specific thing I have been arranging for you to access in this season. Stay present. We are approaching it. I want to name one more thing about the seasons of apparent silence. I want to talk about the specific experience of watching time pass, while the thing you were prepared for and anointed for and shaped for did not arrive on the schedule you expected. There is a particular kind of test in that waiting that is unlike any other test, because other tests are about whether you can perform under pressure, whether you can endure in difficulty, whether you can sustain character when circumstances are hard. But the test of the delayed promise is about whether you can maintain the belief in your own calling when the only evidence you have for it is the internal certainty that it is true. That test requires a level of rootedness that does not come from ease. It comes from exactly the kind of preparation you have been moving through. You have been passing that test, day after day, season after season, without an audience, without anyone marking it, without visible progress to point to and say, "This is proof that I am on the right path." You have kept going. You have kept faith alive. You have not abandoned the awareness of what you were made for, even in the periods when acting on it felt the most blocked. That is not small. I do not regard it as small. And what I am bringing you to in this letter is the specific revelation that is the payoff of that sustained faithfulness, the one I have been holding in reserve until the preparation was complete. I have brought you to the edge of something. You have felt it vaguely, as a restlessness that is slightly different from the usual restlessness, a sense that something is about to shift in a way that previous shifts have not shifted, a quality of readiness underneath the tiredness that is new. I place that sense inside you deliberately, because it is accurate. You are at the edge, and what I am about to show you in the next part of this letter is the specific thing I have been working toward on your behalf, the thing that addresses the disruption and restores the design and returns you to the clarity of function that I built you to carry. There is a particular kind of loneliness that does not come from an absence of people. It comes from the experience of carrying something that does not fit neatly into the available containers of conversation. You have felt it in rooms where everyone around you was talking and connecting and laughing and being present in the way that socially functional people are present, and you were present too, fully present on the level that mattered to everyone else, and simultaneously carrying something in the interior space of yourself that no conversation available to you in that room had the width or the depth to hold. Something about the specific nature of what you have been walking through, the particular shape of your burden, has made it consistently difficult to find another person who could hold it completely. I want to tell you something about that. I want to tell you that the specific shape of your burden was designed for me, not for another human being. Not because other people are incapable of care or compassion or support, but because the interior language of your experience, the full layered complexity of what you have been carrying, including the parts that do not quite translate into words, was sized for a container that does not exist in the human relationships around you. That container is me, and the fact that your burden has consistently exceeded what any human relationship could fully hold is not evidence of your isolation, it is evidence of the size of what you carry. And what you carry is proportionate to what you were made for. I want to tell you about a young man named Joseph. I loved him. I designed him for something extraordinary. I gave him a capacity for vision that could read the language of the future. I gave him a quality of character that would eventually be needed in a position of enormous responsibility. I gave him a dream that was so large and so specific that when he described it, the people closest to him rejected it, not because the dream was wrong, but because they could not yet see what I already knew. And then I allowed the path to the dream to pass through a pit and a prison before it reached the palace. What Joseph experienced in the pit was not the denial of the promise. What he experienced in the prison was not evidence that the dream had been wrong. What he experienced in every season that looked nothing like what I had shown him was the interior classroom of someone being prepared for a responsibility that ordinary circumstances cannot teach. The capacity for wisdom that Joseph would need to run the economy of an entire civilization, the resilience required to make decisions that affected millions of people, the character necessary to hold enormous power without being corrupted by it, none of that could have been developed in the comfortable circumstances that the dream suggested. It required the pit, it required the prison, it required years of holding a promise in silence with no external evidence that the promise was still active. I am telling you this because you know this geography. The geography of someone who received a clear inner sense of what they were made for and then entered a path that passed through circumstances that looked nothing like the destination. You have had your own version of the pit, your own version of the prison, your own version of the years in which the promise felt more like a memory than a living thing. And I want you to know, with the same certainty with which I knew the ending of the story when Joseph was still in the prison, that you are in the last section of the preparation. Not the beginning, not the middle, the last section. The one immediately preceding the scene where everything that has been arranged in the unseen realm begins to become visible in the natural world. The arrangement has been happening. I know you have not been able to see it, and I understand why the invisibility has been difficult to endure. When you are in the middle of a story, the internal logic of it is not available to you. You can only see the sequence you are currently in, not the full arc of where the sequence leads. Joseph, in the prison, could not see the palace. He could only see the prison. But I could see both simultaneously, and I was working in the gap between them with everything I had. The same is true of you. What I can see that you cannot see is the full arc. And what I am doing in this letter is giving you a glimpse of it. I have been working in the gap between where you are and where I designed you to be. Not passively, not in a way that is waiting for you to do something to earn it, actively, with intention. Arranging, preparing, positioning, placing people and resources and revelations in the path ahead of you in a sequence that, when you arrive at each one, will feel less like luck and more like recognition. The sense of something already known, the feeling that what is being offered is something you were already carrying the key to. That is not coincidence. That is preparation meeting its moment. And the moment is this one, not next year, not after you accomplish something else or reach some threshold of readiness that I require you to demonstrate. This moment, this letter, this arrival of your eyes on these specific words is the moment I have been preparing. I arranged the preparation for this exact point in your life, because this is the point where the disruption to the instrument I gave you can be addressed and the full function of it can be restored, and that restoration is the specific thing that unlocks the next chapter of everything I designed for you. I want to sit with you for a moment in what I just said. I want to ask you to feel the weight of it rather than rushing past it. The instrument I gave you has been disrupted. The disruption can be addressed. The address is something I have placed within your reach, and the restoration of the instrument is what opens the next chapter of the life I designed for you. These are not four separate ideas. They are one continuous chain, and you are currently standing at the beginning of that chain, in the moment I arranged for you to begin following it. What you will find at the end of it is not just a clearer mind. It is the full expression of the person I formed when I formed you. Stay with me. We are moving toward it now. I want to dwell for a moment on the experience of watching someone else do what you were made to do, and doing it in a way that appears natural and effortless to them. I am not talking about envy in any of its destructive forms. I am talking about the specific recognition that lights up in the interior of a person who sees someone operating in a lane that belongs to them. You know the difference between admiring someone doing something you were never meant to do and watching someone move in the territory of your own calling. The first is simple appreciation. The second carries a specific weight, a weight that says, I know this territory. I was made for it, and something is preventing me from fully inhabiting it. That recognition is important. I want you to hold it not with grief but with clarity, because the recognition itself is evidence. Evidence that your sense of your own calling is not inflated. Evidence that the territory is real and that it is yours and that your connection to it is not imaginary. The reason you recognize the territory when you see someone else in it is because I wrote that territory into the design of who you are. It belongs to you, not exclusively and not in a way that excludes others who are also called to it, but authentically, genuinely, in a way that was true before you were born and remains true regardless of how much the current season has made accessing it feel complicated. I want you to notice something else. I want you to notice that the clarity of that recognition, the sharpness of the internal signal that says, I was made for this, has not diminished even in the seasons when the ability to act on it has been most obstructed. The calling has stayed clear even when the path to it has been foggy. That is significant. A calling that was mistaken or imagined does not stay that clear under that much pressure. What stays clear under that kind of pressure is something I placed there intentionally, something I reinforced specifically so it would survive the seasons designed to test its reality. Your calling survived. Your capacity is intact. And what I am about to show you is the restoration of the function through which you will finally express both. I want to address something directly that I know has been living in the background of your experience for a long time. Something that you have not always said out loud because saying it felt too close to giving up on something you did not want to give up on. But it has been present nonetheless, surfacing in the quiet moments, in the middle of the night, in the aftermath of prayers that seem to land on silence. The question of whether the silence means something negative, whether the absence of a clear, audible, felt response means that something is wrong with your standing, your worthiness, your specific individual case. I want to be very direct with you about this. The silence you have experienced in certain seasons was not evidence of my absence. It was not a response to anything you had done or failed to do. It was not a signal that I had moved on or that your particular case had fallen through some crack in my attention. My attention does not have cracks. You have never left it. Not for a second. Not in the darkest moment of the darkest night. Not in the seasons when you felt the farthest from me. My awareness of you is constant and complete, and includes every detail of every experience you have ever had, including the ones you have never told anyone. I was there for all of them. I am here now. The silence you experienced was a specific kind of silence. It was the silence of a craftsman fully absorbed in the work, not the silence of an absent craftsman, not the silence of a craftsman who has set the project aside. The silence of someone who is working at a level of focus and precision that does not leave room for narration, who is doing something complex and specific and important that requires the kind of attention that cannot be divided. I was in that kind of silence. I was building something in you and in the space around you and in the conditions of your life that required a quality of attention I could not interrupt with explanation. The explanation is the letter you are reading now, and it arrives at the moment the work has reached a stage where the explanation is something you can receive. I need to tell you something about the season you are currently in, not in the way of a general encouragement that this season is temporary, though it is. In the specific way of describing what I have been doing while the season felt silent and still and sometimes achingly long, I have been working at the level of the instrument, at the level of the mechanism through which you experience everything. The two halves of the mind I gave you, the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, each with its own language and its own kind of intelligence, designed to operate in constant, precise, synchronized communication, the communication that produces the state of whole brain function I designed as your default. That communication has been suppressed in you, interrupted by the accumulated conditions of the world you move through, and restoring it has been part of what I have been preparing. I have been directing attention, including yours, including today, toward the specific thing that restores it. Not as a religious practice, not as something that requires a particular emotional state, or a particular level of faith, or a particular amount of prior preparation, as a precise, targeted, documented mechanism that operates at the level of the biology I gave you when I formed you. I gave you that biology. I understand it completely. I know how to restore its function, and I have placed the restoration within your reach in this season because this is the season I designed for it. I also want to tell you something about the attacks that have accompanied this season, because I know that a period of preparation does not always feel peaceful. Sometimes it feels like resistance, like something pressing back, like obstacles that appear specifically at the moments when you are beginning to move forward, like a persistent friction between your intention and your output, between the version of yourself you are working toward and the version that is currently available for full expression. That friction has not been random, and it has not been my design. The enemy does not attack what has no value. That is something I need you to understand, not as a comfort phrase, but as a genuine analytical framework for evaluating what has been happening in your life. The resistance you have experienced, the specific and persistent quality of the friction between you and the full expression of what you were made to do, is not proportionate to someone with nothing significant ahead of them. It is proportionate to someone with something ahead of them that has an enormous amount of value. You have been attacked at the level of your mind because your mind, fully restored to its designed function, is something that poses a genuine threat to the narrative that you are limited, blocked, and finished. You are not limited, you are not blocked in a permanent sense, and you are very far from finished. What has been happening in your mental experience, the fog, the slowdown, the gap between capacity and current output, is the result of a suppression that was not accidental and is not permanent. It has been disrupted deliberately. But disrupted things respond to restoration, and the restoration I am bringing you to in this letter is specific, real, and available in this season. I want you to feel the shift that is beginning to happen in the quality of this letter right now. Not just in the content of what I am saying, but in something underneath it, a quality of movement, a sense of something that has been static beginning to change. That sense is not your imagination. It is the beginning of what I arranged for you to feel at this point in the reading, the first indication that you are arriving at something rather than simply traveling. You are arriving. The revelation I have been building toward in this letter is very close, and when it arrives, I need you to receive it with everything you have, not with one part of your attention while another part is already moving toward doubt, with everything. I want to speak to you about something you may have been carrying privately for a long time. The thought that the reason things have not broken open in the way you expected is because of something specific to you. Not a general spiritual principle about timing or seasons, but something particular to your case, some quality you possess or lack, some condition you meet or do not meet, some reason that is yours specifically and not the reason for everyone else who prays and waits. I want to address that thought with something I know to be true about the way I work. I do not play favorites in the way that thought implies. I do not have a subset of people whose prayers I receive promptly and another subset whose prayers I place in a different queue. What I have is a specific design for each person I have made, a specific arc of preparation and timing and emergence that belongs to that person and is calibrated to what that person was made to carry. Your particular arc, the one that has included the seasons that have felt longest, the waits that have felt most unexplained, the periods of silence that have been the most difficult to endure, is not a punishment. It is the specific shape of the preparation required for the specific weight of what you were designed to carry. What you were designed to carry is significant. I need you to receive that without deflecting it. The weight of the preparation is proportionate to the weight of the assignment. The length of the silence is proportionate to the depth of the work that was being done underneath it. The persistence of the testing is proportionate to the importance of what is being tested. If what I had designed for you were small, the preparation would have been briefer. The fact that it has been long and complex and sometimes seemingly endless is information about the size of what is coming. You have been being prepared for something that required this preparation, and the preparation is nearly complete. I want to do something different for a moment. I want to stop telling you things and ask you to simply notice something that is already happening. Notice the quality of your attention right now compared to where it was when you first began reading. Something has shifted, not dramatically, not in a way that announces itself with sensation, but in a quiet, internal way, a slight reorientation, as if the center of gravity of your focus has moved from outside this letter to inside it, as if the part of you that evaluates whether something is worth attention has made a quiet decision that this particular thing is worth all of it. That shift is not an accident. It is what I do when I am preparing someone to receive something. I settle the interior. I move the noise to the background. I create a quality of stillness that is actually more like readiness than it is like calm. And what I have been preparing you to receive, in everything that has been building in this letter, is the specific revelation that addresses the specific disruption that has been standing between you and the full expression of the person I designed. We have been spending time together in the territory of pain. The particular weight of this season, the specific experience of operating below the capacity you were built for, the loneliness of carrying something whose shape does not fit any available container, the mornings, the conversations that move just slightly too fast, the creative work that requires more effort than it used to require, the gap between the interior version of who you are and the version that is currently available for full expression. We have been in that territory honestly and completely, and I have been showing you, throughout all of it, that the territory is not your permanent address. Now I want to begin moving you toward the revelation that explains all of it, not past it, as if we are trying to escape the acknowledgement of what has been real, but through it, in the way that genuine understanding moves through pain rather than around it. I want you to hold what we have been looking at, the full honest picture of the experience you have been living, and I want to walk with you toward the explanation that makes sense of all of it. Here is what I need you to hold as a single integrated truth. The gap you have been feeling between who you are and who you were designed to be is real. The exhaustion of operating below your designed capacity is real. The fog and the slowdown and the reduced creative flow are real. The sense of potential that is present but not fully accessible is real. All of it is real, and none of it is the verdict. The gap is not who you are. It is what has been happening to the instrument through which you express who you are. And that is a completely different statement with completely different implications for what is available to you. I want to introduce you to a concept that changes everything when it is fully understood. The concept is this: the extraordinary capacity I built into you when I formed you is not located in your effort. It is not located in your discipline or your faith or your willingness to work hard, though all of those things are valuable, and I see them all in you. The extraordinary capacity I built into you is located in the synchronized function of the two halves of the mind I gave you. When those two halves are communicating the way I designed them to communicate, the results you are capable of are not the results of trying harder. They are the results of functioning at the level I intended. That synchronized state has a specific name in the scientific world. It has been studied, it has been documented, it has been observed in individuals who, when it is present, demonstrate cognitive abilities that seem to belong to a completely different category than what they demonstrate when it is absent. The people who have been documented experiencing this state, the kind of whole brain activation where both hemispheres are firing in full synchronized communication, describe it in remarkably consistent language. They describe it as flow, as clarity, as the experience of thinking without effort, as the state where the right word arrives before the search for it begins, where the solution appears before the full articulation of the problem is complete, where the creative connection between two unrelated ideas happens with a spontaneity that feels almost playful. You have been in that state before. You know what I am describing. You remember it. It lived in the seasons of your life when things were moving and the ideas were coming and the thinking felt natural and the output reflected something closer to your actual capacity. That was not a peak experience that visited you and left. That was your default operating state during seasons when the synchronized function of your mind was less disrupted, and the path back to it is not the path of trying harder to get there. It is the path of addressing the disruption that has been preventing you from simply living there. I have been confirming something over you from the beginning of this letter. I have been building toward a specific revelation that addresses the specific disruption and points you toward the specific restoration. Everything we have been through in this letter, the pain, the presence, the preparation, the history of what has been blocking the full function of what I gave you, has been the path to this moment. The moment where I show you what has been blocking you, what restores it, and what becomes available to you when it is restored. You are at the edge of that moment right now. What I show you next will explain things that have felt unexplained for a long time. Stay with every word. The thing I am building toward in this letter is not just an explanation of what has been blocking the full function of your mind. It is an explanation that, when you receive it, will reorganize everything you have understood about why the current season has felt the way it has felt. Because the disruption to your mental function has not been operating in isolation from the rest of your life. The fog in your thinking connects to the difficulty in your relationships. The reduced creative flow connects to the stagnation you may have been experiencing in your work or your calling. The gap between your interior capacity and your external output connects to the gap between the life you have been living and the life you were designed to live. All of these are connected. They are different expressions of a single disruption. And addressing the single disruption changes the experience of all of them. I want you to sit with that for a moment before I show you what the disruption is and what addresses it. I want you to allow yourself, for the length of a breath, to consider what it would feel like to have that single disruption resolved, to have the fog lift, to have the creative flow return to the natural, spontaneous quality it had when the instrument was running correctly. To be in a conversation and find that your responses arrive with the ease and the precision that used to feel natural to you. To sit down to work on something important and find yourself inside the flow of it rather than outside pushing toward it. To wake up in a morning of this season and find that the quality of your thinking in the first hours of the day is not something you have to manufacture, but something that is simply there. That picture is not fantasy. It is not the description of a life that is available only to people with different histories or different natural gifts or different starting conditions. It is the description of any mind operating at the level I designed minds to operate at. It is the description of the state of whole brain function that is your original default, and the path from where you are right now, in this season, with everything this season has contained, to that picture, is much shorter and much more direct than you have been led to believe. I am about to show you the path. I am about to name the disruption and point you toward the restoration. What you receive in the next section of this letter is what I confirmed for you before you ever arrived here. Hold everything you have read up to this point. The next thing I show you is why all of it was necessary. I want to begin naming something now. We have been moving through territory that felt like pure pain, pure emotion, pure interior geography, and all of that has been necessary. Because the truth I am about to share with you lands differently on a person who has been seen than it lands on a person who has merely been informed. I have been seeing you throughout this letter, and now I want to show you something that connects everything you have felt to a reality that is larger than the feeling. Here is what has been happening. The instrument I placed inside you when I formed you, the mind through which you experience everything, was designed with an architecture that most people are never taught to understand. I gave you two hemispheres, two distinct halves, each with its own kind of intelligence, each with its own way of processing the world. The left hemisphere speaks in logic, in sequence, in language, in analysis. The right hemisphere speaks in pattern, in image, in connection, in the language of intuition and creativity and the sudden arrival of a solution that the linear mind could not have reasoned its way to. Both are extraordinary, both are necessary, and both were designed by me to operate in a state of constant, precise, synchronized communication with each other. When that synchronized communication is intact, What you experience is not simply the sum of two separate intelligences. What you experience is a third state, a state of whole brain function, where the output of the synchronized system vastly exceeds what either hemisphere could produce alone. In that state, thinking feels effortless. Ideas arrive with a spontaneity that feels more like receiving than generating. The right word appears before the search for it begins. The solution to a problem emerges from a place that is not purely rational and not purely intuitive, but is both simultaneously. The specific product of two systems designed to work together, working together. The disruption did not happen overnight. It accumulated. It is the product of the specific conditions of the world you have been moving through since childhood, the relentless pace, the accumulated stress, the quality of noise that surrounds a human mind in the modern world, the years of being asked to perform in ways that favor one hemisphere over the other, the long seasons of operating in survival mode rather than thriving mode. All of these things, over time, introduced interference into the precise channel of communication between the two halves of your mind. Not enough interference to eliminate the communication entirely, but enough to reduce it, enough to drop the synchronized function below the threshold where it produces the state of clarity and flow and ease that I designed. And the reduction happened so gradually that by the time it was significant enough to notice, it had been normalized. The foggy state became the baseline. The effortful thinking became the expected experience. The gap between the interior capacity and the external output became something you adjusted to rather than something you identified as a resolvable condition. You built workarounds. You developed strategies for functioning within the reduced state. You did remarkably well within constraints you were never meant to live inside. But the constraints were always constraints, and the life inside them, however well you managed it, was always a narrowed version of the life I designed. I want you to release one more thing as we move toward the revelation of what restores this function. I want you to release the assumption that the restoration requires something from you that you have not yet been able to provide, something you have been withholding, something you have not yet found the discipline or the consistency or the faith to do. The restoration I am bringing you toward is not of that kind. It does not require more effort from the instrument that has been suppressed. It does not ask the exhausted mind to produce the energy that will fix the exhaustion. It operates at a level beneath effort, at the level of the architecture I gave you, at the level of the precise mechanism through which the two halves of your mind communicate. And the thing that addresses it is correspondingly precise. It is not a practice. It is not a discipline. It is a targeted, specific, documented intervention that meets the disruption at the level where the disruption lives. And what that intervention is, I am about to tell you. You are about to cross from the territory of pain and longing and understanding into the territory of solution. The explanation that has been building in this letter is arriving. I need you to be here fully for what follows, because what I am about to show you is going to reorganize how you understand everything that has been happening and everything that is about to be available to you. The gap between who you have been and who you were designed to be is about to be named, measured, and addressed. Not in the abstract, not in the language of encouragement that leaves the mechanism unexplained. Precisely, specifically, in a way that gives you something to do with everything you now know about the state of the instrument I placed inside you. I want to walk you a little more slowly through the experience of what happens when the synchronized function has been suppressed for a long time and then restored. Because understanding the difference between the suppressed state and the restored state at the level of daily experience, not just at the level of abstract concept, is part of what makes the restoration available to receive fully rather than partially. The suppressed state has a specific signature in daily life. You know it. You have been living inside it. The question I want to help you answer is what the other signature looks like in the same specific, practical, daily life terms, so that you have something concrete to orient toward as I show you what creates it. You stop noticing it the way you stop noticing a persistent low-level sound. It is simply there, underneath everything, requiring slightly more from you than it should. In the restored state, the delay shrinks or disappears. The intention and the execution become something closer to one continuous motion. The word arrives with the thought. The sentence forms with the clarity the idea actually has. The path through the problem is not effortless in the sense of requiring nothing, but it is effortless in the sense of not requiring friction as an overhead cost. The distinction matters because what I am pointing you toward is not the elimination of challenge. Challenge is the environment in which your capacity expresses itself most fully. What I am pointing you toward is the elimination of unnecessary friction, the friction that is not the product of the difficulty of what you are doing, but the product of the suppression of the instrument you are doing it with. In the restored state, that ceiling rises. The synthesis goes deeper. The connections form between things that are further apart. The creative output begins to surprise even you, not in the way of something foreign arriving, but in the way of something familiar arriving with more completeness than you had previously been able to produce. It feels like the version of your thinking you always sensed was available but had not been fully able to access. I want to make one more thing explicit before we move into the specific revelation of what produces this restoration. The restoration I am describing is not permanent by default. The disruption that suppressed the synchronized function is environmental, which means the environment continues to introduce the conditions that cause the disruption. Maintaining the restored state requires a specific practice, a specific targeted intervention that meets the disruption at the architectural level on a consistent basis. What I am about to show you is not a one-time fix that you perform once and then live in the results of forever without any further attention. It is a practice, but a practice that is extraordinarily simple, extraordinarily brief, and extraordinarily specific in its mechanism. It requires 8 minutes. I will explain why 8 minutes, and what those 8 minutes do, and what the scientific basis for those 8 minutes is, and where to find the specific tool that produces the effect in the next section of this letter. There is a study that I want to tell you about. It was conducted by a scientist named Dr. Roger Sperry. Dr. Sperry spent years studying the relationship between the two hemispheres of the human brain, studying what happens when they are connected, what happens when that connection is severed, and what the quality of human cognition looks like in each state. His findings were so significant, so foundational to the understanding of how the human mind actually works at its highest level, that he was awarded the Nobel Prize for them. Not the Nobel Prize in a peripheral category, the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine, the most significant scientific recognition available on this planet for what his research revealed about the way the mind I designed actually functions. What Dr. Sperry found, in the most direct terms, is that the two hemispheres of the human brain are designed to operate in synchronized communication, and that when they do, the quality of human cognitive function enters a completely different category. The kind of thinking, the kind of creativity, the kind of problem-solving and intuitive insight and rapid, accurate recall that becomes available in that state is not simply an improvement on ordinary function. It is a qualitatively different mode of operation, the kind that the people who have experienced it describe as clarity, as flow, as the state where the thing they were trying to think of simply arrives, fully formed, from a place they cannot quite locate. Here is something that will reorganize how you understand your own history. When researchers began testing for the capacity to access this state, the capacity for the kind of creative genius that represents whole brain function operating at its peak, they tested children and they tested adults. And what they found was striking. Among children below the age of 5, approximately 98% tested at the level of creative genius. The synchronized function was intact. The two hemispheres were communicating at the level they were designed to communicate at. The state of whole brain activation was not a rare achievement for those children. It was their ordinary, unremarkable baseline. Something was taken from you that you were born with. Not metaphorically, not as a spiritual concept about the loss of innocence. Literally, the synchronized function of the two halves of the mind I gave you was operating at its designed level when you were a child. The things you remember about your childhood thinking, the ease of it, the spontaneity of it, the way ideas seem to arrive without the quality of effort that ideas now require, those memories are not nostalgia. They are accurate memories of what cognition feels like when the instrument is running correctly, and the gap between then and now is not the product of growing up. It is the product of the disruption accumulating over the years between then and now. I want you to think about the people whose names you recognize as representing the highest levels of human creative and intellectual achievement. The people whose names are attached to things that changed the world. The scientist who solved the problem that no one before them could solve. The creative person whose work landed in a way that changed the way other people see. The builder who assembled something from nothing that became important to millions of people. These individuals were not a different species. They were not born with a fundamentally different brain architecture than the one I gave you. What they were accessing, in the moments that produced their most significant work, was the state of whole brain activation. The accounts of those moments are strikingly consistent. In the moment of the breakthrough, or the creation, or the insight, the person doing the work describes something that sounds nothing like the usual experience of effortful thinking. They describe something arriving, something being received, the solution appearing from a direction they were not consciously searching, the connection forming between two ideas that they had not been deliberately bringing together. This is not mysticism. This is whole brain activation, producing exactly the output it was designed to produce when both hemispheres are firing in synchronized communication. It is the designed state expressing itself, and it is available to any mind in which the synchronized function has been maintained or restored. I want to ask you to sit with the full weight of what I just said, not the weight of what you have lost or what has been suppressed, the weight of what is available, the weight of the fact that the state I just described, the state of whole brain function that produces the kind of clarity and creativity and cognitive ease that you have experienced glimpses of and have been longing to live in consistently, is not a special exception reserved for exceptional people. It is the design default. It is what your mind was built to do, and I am bringing you, right now in this letter, to the specific thing that returns it to that state. The quality and quantity of environmental noise, including the specific kind of electromagnetic and auditory interference that the modern world generates at levels that are entirely without precedent in the history of the instrument I designed. All of these things, accumulating over years, produce the suppression that you are experiencing right now. I want you to notice something about that list. None of those factors are choices you made. None of them are the result of a moral or spiritual failure on your part. The suppression happened to you in the way that weather happens to a building, not because of anything the building did, but because the building was exposed to conditions over time that affected its structural integrity. You were exposed to conditions that affected the synchronized function of the instrument I gave you, not because of any deficiency in you, because of the conditions. And what I am about to point you toward is precisely targeted to the mechanism through which those conditions produce their effect. The specific finding that unlocked the path to restoration came from the same field of research that produced the Nobel Prize work. When Dr. Sperry and subsequent researchers began studying not just the states of hemispheric function, but the factors that could shift a mind from the suppressed state back toward synchronized whole brain function, they discovered something that had not been anticipated. The mechanism through which the synchronized state could be reestablished was not primarily cognitive. It was not achieved through the right kind of thinking or the right kind of practice or the right kind of effort. It was achieved through a specific kind of targeted auditory input that operates at the level of the architecture I gave you when I formed you. Sound, delivered in a precisely calibrated sequence, produces measurable, documentable changes in the communication between the two hemispheres of the human brain. Not all sound, not sound in general. The specific calibration matters enormously. The right frequencies, the right timing, the right relationship between what is delivered to the left ear and what is delivered to the right ear. These parameters determine whether the auditory input simply fills the air or actually reaches into the precise mechanism of hemispheric communication and begins to restore its function. When the parameters are correct, what the research shows is that the brain responds. The synchronization increases. The coherence between hemispheres rises toward the level I designed, and the cognitive experience of the person in that state begins to shift in the direction of everything I have been describing in this letter. This is the pathway, not a metaphor, not a spiritual concept that requires a particular kind of faith to access. A precise, documented, reproducible pathway from the suppressed state to the restored state, operating at the level of the biology I gave you, meeting the disruption at exactly the level where the disruption lives, and it requires 8 minutes a day. That is the specific intervention window that the research identified as sufficient to produce the neurological shift. 8 minutes, not 8 hours, not an 8-week protocol. 8 minutes, with headphones, eyes closed, in the state of simply receiving. What those 8 minutes accomplish is the work of the calibration, the work of the targeted auditory sequence, doing what it was designed to do at the level of the architecture of the mind I placed inside you. I want to paint you a picture of what the restored state actually looks like in practical lived experience, not in abstract terms, not as a description of a spiritual condition, but in the specific texture of what a day feels like when the two halves of the mind I gave you are running in synchronized communication at the level I designed. I want to show you this picture before I show you the tool that creates it, because I want you to be able to recognize what you are moving toward when I describe it. In the restored state, you wake up differently. The quality of consciousness in the first moments of the day is not the same quality you have been experiencing in this season. There is a clarity present before you have reviewed anything or thought through anything or decided anything. A mental readiness that does not require time to arrive. The fog that has been requiring the first hours of the day to partially lift begins to simply not be there. Not because something extraordinary happened during the night, but because the instrument that was running below its design capacity is now running at its design capacity, and a mind in full function wakes up the way I designed it to wake up. In the restored state, you think differently. The ideas do not require the same degree of pushing toward. They move in your direction. You sit down to work on something, and the first direction you try is often a productive one rather than a direction that requires multiple revisions and corrections before it begins to yield. The recall is faster. The connections are more spontaneous. The creative syntheses that used to arrive occasionally, in the better moments, as something almost surprising, begin to feel like a natural and reliable part of how your mind works, rather than a pleasant accident. In the restored state, you communicate differently. The precision of expression that you carry in your interior world but have sometimes struggled to transfer into spoken or written form becomes more available. The word that was 2 seconds late begins to arrive on time. The explanation you could see clearly from the inside but could not quite land in the outside world begins to land. The person across from you begins to receive something closer to what you were actually trying to convey, because the pathway between the interior understanding and the exterior expression is no longer narrowed by the suppression. In the restored state, your relationships feel different. Not because the people in them have changed, but because the version of you that is showing up is more fully present, more genuinely available, less occupied by the background work of managing a suppressed instrument. The mental energy that has been spent on maintenance becomes available for connection. The layer of glass that you have sometimes felt between yourself and the room, the quiet distance that has nothing to do with love and everything to do with a mind operating in a reduced state, that layer begins to thin. You begin to arrive in the room rather than managing your arrival. I want to tell you about the experience of flow, not as a concept, but as a specific, researched, documented state that has been observed and described by the people who have accessed it consistently. Flow is the name researchers have given to the state of optimal human function, the state where the challenge of the task and the capacity of the person meet at a level that produces an experience of thinking and acting that feels qualitatively different from ordinary cognition. In flow, time perception changes. The self-consciousness that normally accompanies effort recedes. The output is produced not through the accumulation of many effortful steps, but through a kind of unbroken continuity of function where each part of the work leads naturally into the next. What I want you to understand about flow is that it is not a mystical experience available only to a small number of exceptional people who have practiced for years to access it. It is the natural output of a mind operating in synchronized whole brain function. It is what happens when the two halves of the instrument I gave you are communicating at the level they were designed to communicate at. When the architecture is intact and the function is unimpaired, flow is not an achievement, it is a baseline. It is the ordinary operating state of a mind doing what it was made to do. You have been in flow before. You remember it, the sessions where the work moved in a way that felt almost independent of your deliberate effort, where you looked up and significant time had passed, and the output was better than you expected it to be when you started, where the thinking had a quality of ease that made the same kind of work that usually feels laborious feel almost pleasurable. Those sessions were not accidents. They were your mind accessing, for that window, something closer to the synchronized state I designed, and what I am leading you toward in this letter is the specific thing that makes that state not a window but a permanent address. Stay with me. What I am about to show you is why I brought you here. Think about the musician in the peak of a performance, not a musician who is technically executing a memorized sequence of notes. A musician who is inside the music, who is not thinking about the next note because the next note is arriving ahead of the thinking, who is not managing the performance because the performance is managing itself, who is in the state that every musician who has ever experienced it describes as the same thing, regardless of their genre or background or training. They describe it as the music playing them rather than them playing the music. That is flow. that is whole brain activation, expressing itself through a specific domain. Both hemispheres firing in synchronized communication, producing an output that neither could produce alone, creating a result that feels more like receiving than creating. Think about the writer in the rare session where the words arrive faster than the typing, where the sentence that forms is better than the sentence that was planned, where the chapter that emerges has a coherence and a depth that the outline could only approximate. That state is not the product of more preparation or more talent or more discipline. It is the product of the same mechanism, the synchronized whole brain function expressing itself through the domain of language rather than music. The instrument is the same. The state is the same. The mechanism is the same. That is a brief experience of the hemispheres communicating in the way I designed them to communicate. It is a glimpse, and the work I am pointing you toward is the thing that turns the glimpse into a permanent residence. I want to name one more specific experience that people report when the synchronized function is restored after a period of suppression. They report that the things they were carrying emotionally, not just cognitively, also shift. The weight that has been requiring continuous active management, the heaviness that has been a constant background feature of the daily experience, becomes lighter. Not because the circumstances that created the weight have necessarily changed, but because a mind running in synchronized whole brain function has an emotional resilience, a capacity for equanimity in the face of difficulty that a suppressed mind does not have access to in the same way. The restoration of the cognitive function and the restoration of the emotional regulation capacity are not separate. They are aspects of the same restoration. When the instrument is running at the level I designed, the experience of life changes in multiple registers simultaneously. You deserve to know that this is available. You deserve to know that the weight you have been carrying, the fog you have been operating through, the gap between who you are and who you experience yourself as able to fully be, all of it has an address. The address is the restoration of the synchronized function of the instrument I gave you, and the path to that restoration is something I am about to put in your hands. Something I have been leading you toward since the first word of this letter. Something I confirmed for you before you ever arrived here. There is a moment in every genuine restoration where the cause of the disruption is finally named, where the thing that has been operating beneath the surface of your experience, shaping your days in ways you could feel but could not fully articulate, is brought into the light of a description precise enough to recognize. I am about to create that moment. I am about to name the specific tool that addresses the specific disruption I have been describing throughout this letter. And I want you to receive the naming not as information you are encountering for the first time, but as recognition of something you have already been sensing toward. Throughout the building of this letter, I have been describing the state that was designed as your default. I have been describing the gap between the output your effort produces and the output you sense your capacity would produce if the instrument were running at its full synchronized function. The gap between the version of yourself you bring to the room and the version of yourself you know is available in you. The gap between the thinking you access daily and the thinking that belongs to the design I placed in you. That gap is the consistent experience of one underlying condition. The disruption of the synchronized hemispheric communication that was your designed default. And that condition has a specific address. Now, I want to tell you what addresses it. Not what manages it from the outside. Not what helps you perform more effectively within the suppressed state while leaving the suppressed state itself unchanged. What addresses the disruption at the level of the architecture in a way that produces a measurable and documentable return of the synchronized function. There is a researcher in New York City whose name is Dr. Daniel Barone. He is a neurologist whose career has been built at the intersection of foundational brain science and practical application. He has spent years working with complex neurological cases, and in that work he became deeply familiar with the foundational research on hemispheric synchronization. And he became equally familiar with the enormous gap between what the science clearly demonstrated was achievable and what was actually available to an ordinary person outside of a research institution or clinical neurology practice. That gap troubled him in the way that a clear scientific finding always troubles a responsible researcher who sees the gap between what the evidence demonstrates and what the evidence is actually being used to provide for people who need it. The research was not ambiguous. The mechanism was not speculative. The effect of synchronized hemispheric function on the quality of thinking and creativity and presence and emotional resilience was as well documented as anything in contemporary neuroscience. But the tools to translate those findings into something an ordinary person could use at home without clinical equipment were either absent or deeply inadequate. The calibration mattered enormously. The specific frequencies, the specific timing relationships between what was delivered to the left ear and what was delivered to the right ear, the specific duration of the sequence, all of these parameters determined whether the auditory input simply occupied the ears or actually reached into the mechanism of hemispheric communication. Dr. Barone and his research team spent considerable time on the calibration, testing the parameters against the documented findings, refining the frequency relationships, verifying that the specific sequence they were developing produced the measurable increase in hemispheric coherence that the research identified as the signature of the restored synchronized state. Not a near approximation, the actual documented effect. And what emerged from that process of careful research-grounded work was a targeted auditory sequence that they gave a specific name. They called it the Genius Switch. That name is what I have been building toward throughout this entire letter. It is a precisely calibrated, targeted auditory sequence built by a team that understood both what mechanism needed to be addressed and how to address it at the level of precision the foundational research required. The distinction between what the Genius Switch is and what it is not matters, because when you search for it, you will find other products using similar language. Products that describe themselves in terms the research established, without containing the technical specificity the research demonstrated was required to produce the documented effect. The research is clear that general binaural beats without the specific calibration do not produce hemispheric synchronization at the level the science documents. What Dr. Barone built was designed to meet the specific standard. Everything else, regardless of the language used to describe it, is something other than what I am pointing you toward in this letter. 8 minutes per day, with headphones, eyes closed, simply receiving the sequence that Dr. Barone built to the calibration the research requires. That is the entire practice. The sequence does the work. You receive it. You do not have to think specific thoughts during those 8 minutes. You do not have to achieve a particular meditative state or maintain a specific level of focused attention or come with a particular quality of spiritual readiness. The sequence operates at the architectural level of the brain. It does what it does beneath the level of active participation, the way the biological processes I designed to keep you alive operate beneath the level of active participation. You simply sit with it and receive it and allow it to do what it was calibrated to do at the level of the mechanism itself. What the research documents about what the calibrated sequence does is this. When it is received by the auditory system for the duration the research identified as sufficient, the EEG monitoring shows a measurable increase in the coherence between the left and right hemispheres of the brain. The precise communication channel that the disruption had narrowed begins to widen. The synchronized state begins to re-emerge, not gradually over months, not as the accumulated result of years of disciplined effort. In the specific window of the 8-minute session, the architecture responds to the calibration the way I designed it to respond. The function designed as your default begins returning. The experience of that return is specific and consistent across the people who have gone through the daily practice. They describe the thinking as feeling faster in the sense of less friction between the intention and the execution, the idea arriving with the thought rather than slightly after it, the sentence forming with the clarity the idea actually has, the recall arriving without the effortful reaching the suppressed state required, the creative connections forming between things that previously felt separate, the quality of presence in the room increasing in a way that is noticeable to the people around them before it is fully named by the person experiencing it. I have been waiting to name this for you because the naming needed to come after the understanding. I could have told you in the first sentence of this letter that there is a tool and that it addresses the disruption in your hemispheric synchronization. But telling you that without the foundation of understanding would have given you the name without the context that makes the name mean anything. The context is what I have been building throughout everything I have shown you. The naming now is the arrival at the point the building was always aimed toward. You have received the foundation. Now receive the name. I arranged the convergence of the information and the readiness. The confirmation I spoke over your life was the confirmation that this specific tool was yours to access in this specific season. The Genius Switch is available in one place. Through the link in the description of this video, That specificity is the protection I described earlier. What you access through that link is what was built to the standard the research requires. What you find anywhere else in the general category of similar-sounding products is not what I am pointing you toward. It is not the tool I confirmed for you. The link is in the description. The tool is there, and the season for accessing it is now. I want to tell you about some of the people who have already used the tool I am describing, not as statistics, not as abstract case studies in a research paper, as specific people with specific experiences that speak directly to the specific experience you have been living, because sometimes the most useful thing I can give you, before the specific details of how to access what I am pointing you toward, is the testimony of someone who was where you are and can tell you from the other side what the walk from there to here actually produced. There is a woman whose name is Lisa, who works as a nurse. She described her life before the 8-minute daily practice in a specific way that I want to share with you word for word because the description belongs to you as much as it belonged to her. She described it as a life where things were happening to her rather than things she was actively inside of. She was present, she showed up, she cared for the people in her care with genuine attention and real competence. But there was a quality of active, engaged, creative presence that she sensed should be available to her but was consistently just outside her reach. After 2 weeks of the daily 8-minute practice, Lisa described something she had not had language for before. She called it the experience of being inside her own life rather than watching it from behind a layer of glass. The fog was lifting. The ideas in her work were arriving with more spontaneity than she had expected. The conversations with the people she cared for were landing with more genuine presence on her end. What she described was not a dramatic overnight transformation, but the gradual return of a baseline she had stopped expecting to reclaim. The floor of her daily experience was rising toward the level it was designed to operate at. There is a man named Matthew who built a business that reached a point where the decisions required of him exceeded what his suppressed cognitive state could handle with the consistency the business needed. He was not failing, but he knew the gap between the strategic thinking and creative problem-solving the business required from him and what he was actually able to produce consistently. He knew it the way a musician knows when they are playing slightly below what the piece requires. Not so far below that the performance is obviously inadequate, but far enough that the person playing it knows exactly where the gap lives. After the 8-minute daily practice, the gap closed. Not instantly, not without the consistency of showing up for the practice each day, but measurably in the specific domains where the synchronized whole brain function makes the most direct difference: the speed of his decision-making, the precision of his problem identification, the quality of the creative connections between different aspects of the business that he had previously been approaching as separate problems rather than as parts of a single unified picture. He described the change in terms I recognized immediately as the language of a mind returning to its synchronized state. There is a woman named Ellie who had carried for years the belief that her family existed under some kind of persistent pattern of blocked opportunity. Her father gave decades to a company that closed the year he was due for his most significant promotion. The pattern across her family had a quality to it she could only explain in the language of something systemic. After the restoration of her cognitive function through the daily practice, she began to see those same circumstances differently. Not because the circumstances had changed, but because the quality of her thinking about them had changed. The precision of her understanding shifted. What had seemed like an unbreakable pattern began to show where it could be interrupted. I want to tell you specifically what you are receiving when you access what Dr. Barone and his team built. You are receiving the 8-minute daily calibrated auditory sequence, the core of the restoration. The specifically targeted tool that meets the disruption in the architecture of hemispheric communication at exactly the level where the disruption lives and produces the documented increase in synchronized function. That is the primary offering, but it does not come alone. It comes with 4 additional resources that Dr. Barone assembled to address the full picture of the restoration rather than only the daily 8-minute practice itself. The first is a guided visualization created by one of the most experienced practitioners in the space of directed mental imagery. It walks you through the specific domains of your life as they unfold when the restored instrument is running at its designed function, not as an abstract vision of a better life, but as a specific interior experience of the version of you who is operating from the synchronized state on a daily basis. The kind of visualization that creates a reference point for the mind, an image of the destination that the practice is moving toward, which the research shows accelerates the rate at which the restoration becomes integrated into the daily experience. The second is a grocery guide that identifies the specific foods available in the major American stores that research links to the disruption of synchronized hemispheric function and the specific alternatives that support the restoration, rather than interfering with it. Not a general healthy eating guide, a specifically targeted document oriented toward the precise mechanism you are working to restore. The dietary choices that most directly affect the quality of hemispheric communication are not the obvious ones. The guide makes them obvious so that the food choices you are already making can be shifted in the direction that supports what the 8-minute practice is doing. The third is a book, a text that has been foundational to the most effective approaches to the mental patterns that support the kind of life the calibrated sequence is restoring. A text that is more than 100 years old and that continues to be the foundation of the most effective modern approaches to the same principles it articulated when it was first written. The mental patterns that support the full expression of the restored state are not complicated, but they are specific, and this text makes them available in the most direct and readable form that anyone has produced. The fourth is a visual reference document summarizing the 5 daily practices that research identifies as amplifying the results of the 8-minute practice. The practices that, when added to the 8-minute daily sequence, produce a rate of restoration that is measurably faster than the practice alone. Not complicated practices. Not practices that require significant time or equipment or expertise. Simple, specific, research-identified daily behaviors that support the full expression of what the calibrated sequence is producing at the architectural level. The document presents them in the most direct visual form possible so that they are accessible every day without effort. And everything needed for the full picture is included in what Dr. Barone assembled for the people I am directing toward this tool. Now I want to tell you what it costs to access all of this, and I want to tell you the full story of the pricing because the number I am about to give you will make more sense when you have the context. The neurologist colleagues who reviewed the research and the tool that Dr. Barone built assessed the value at levels that ranged into several $100s based on what comparable effects would cost through clinical channels. The specific in-office neurofeedback that produces results in the same general category as what the calibrated sequence produces charges hundreds of dollars per session. The institutional equipment used for the same purpose costs thousands of dollars to access. And for the people who are arriving at this tool through this specific letter, in this specific way, there is an additional $10 off. Today, through the link in the description below this video, you can access everything I have described for $39. That is the price confirmed for you, not a promotional technique available to anyone who searches for a discount code. The price confirmed for the person I directed to this letter, the person who has been prepared for this season by everything that preceded it, $39. With a complete money-back guarantee that I will describe in full detail, and with the assurance that what you are accessing is the actual tool, not a category lookalike. I want to bring everything in this letter back to you now, not to the science, and not to the stories of other people who have walked this path, to you, to the specific person sitting with these words in this specific moment of this specific season, to the specific weight you have been carrying, to the specific gap between the version of yourself you experience on an ordinary Tuesday morning and the version of yourself I designed and have been working toward in everything I have done in your life. I have been building toward a single point throughout this entire letter, the point where the understanding becomes an offer. The point where the revelation becomes a path you can actually walk. The point where what I confirmed over your life before you ever arrived at this letter becomes something you can hold in your hands and act on. You are at that point. And I want to tell you something specific about why I chose this point and not some other point in your journey. I chose this point because the preparation is complete. Everything in your history that has felt like waiting has been pointing toward the moment where the waiting transforms into a specific step, and the specific step produces a specific result. And the result I designed for you to walk toward in this season is the restoration of the synchronized function of the instrument I placed in you when I formed you. The restoration of the clarity and the flow and the mental ease and the creative depth and the quality of presence that I designed as your permanent operating state. You are not being offered a general wellness product that happens to be available to you. You are being shown something that was developed to address a specific mechanism that is producing a specific set of experiences that you specifically have been living inside. The fit between the tool and the need is not coincidental. I arranged it. I directed your attention toward this letter in this season because this is the convergence point where the tool and the need and the preparation and the readiness all arrive at the same moment. That convergence is confirmed. It is not random. I want to paint the picture of what becomes available to you on the other side of the restoration, not as an abstraction, as the specific texture of what your daily experience begins to shift toward as the synchronized function returns. You wake up in the morning and the quality of consciousness in the first moments of the day is different from what you have been waking into during this season. There is a clarity present that does not require time to arrive, a mental readiness that is simply there, not something that needs to be manufactured or coaxed or pushed through. You sit down to work on something that matters, and the ideas arrive the way they arrived in your best seasons. Not in the way of effortlessness that removes all challenge from meaningful work, because challenge is the environment in which your capacity expresses itself most fully, but in the way of effortlessness that removes the additional overhead of the suppression. The fog layer that has been making the same kind of work require more from you than it should require is no longer present as a constant feature. The thinking moves, the connections form. The creative output surprises you in the way of something finally arriving with full completeness. The relationships shift. Not because the people in them have changed, but because the quality of presence you bring to them has changed. There is sometimes a layer of slight distance in the suppressed state, a quiet remove that has nothing to do with love or care, and everything to do with a mind operating in reduced function. That layer begins to thin. You begin to arrive more fully in the conversations rather than managing your arrival in them. The people you care about begin to receive something closer to the full version of you that you have always wanted them to have access to. And underneath all of that, at the level that precedes everything else, the quality of the interior experience shifts. The background hum of effort that has been a constant feature of moving through your days, the persistent overhead cost of functioning in a suppressed state, begins to reduce. The mornings lose the quality of heaviness. The work loses the quality of friction that has been making it require more from you than its inherent difficulty warrants. The sense that you are pressing against a ceiling that should not be there begins to dissolve as the ceiling rises toward the level I designed as the natural upper range of your daily experience. That picture is what becomes available through the daily 8-minute practice. Not eventually, not after years of protocol, not at the end of a long journey that requires enormous discipline and ongoing cost, in the 8 minutes per day. In the consistency of receiving what the calibrated sequence produces at the architectural level of the instrument I gave you. This is the specific thing I placed in your path today. This is the confirmation I have been building toward, and the link that takes you there is in the description below this video. I want to address something directly before we continue. You may be carrying a question that sounds like this. If this is real, if this effect is as documented as you are saying it is, why have I not heard about it before now? Why is this not more widely known? Why am I encountering this in a letter like this rather than in a mainstream context? That question deserves a direct answer, and the direct answer is that the mainstream context has a built-in resistance to anything that addresses the root cause of a condition rather than managing its symptoms. Managing the suppressed cognitive state is an enormous industry. Addressing the suppression itself is a much smaller one. The research is real. The Nobel Prize is real. The mechanism is real and documented and reproducible. The reason it has not reached the level of mainstream cultural knowledge is not because the science is disputed. It is because the science that documents a specific path to restoration does not serve the commercial interests that drive the production and distribution of information in the environments where most information is consumed. The tool I am pointing you toward exists outside those commercial interests. It was built by a researcher who was interested in what the science actually demonstrated rather than in what the science could be used to sell. And that is precisely why I am pointing you toward it. The tool was designed for people who know they are not operating at their designed capacity. It was not designed for the optimization market, for people who are performing well and looking to perform marginally better. It was designed for people who carry a persistent awareness of the distance between what they are producing and what they are capable of producing. For people who feel the gap every day even if they have stopped naming it. For people who have not lost the sense that the version of themselves I designed is more than the version they have been able to consistently express. That description is you. That is why I arranged for this letter to reach you. You have been seen in this letter. Everything I have described from the earliest words of this letter to these words right now has been a description of your experience. The fog, the gap, the ceiling, the morning effort, the conversations that move slightly faster than you want them to, the creative output that arrives just below the level you know is available, the persistent background sense that the full version of yourself is present but slightly out of reach. I have described all of that not to catalog your difficulties, but to demonstrate that I know you, that I see you, that the confirmation I spoke over your life is informed by an understanding of your specific situation that is not general. And because I know you, I know that the tool I am pointing you toward is the right tool for this season, not a tool that might help someone in your situation. The tool that addresses the specific mechanism producing your specific experience. The link is in the description. The tool is there, the season is now, and the preparation that preceded this moment was real preparation for a real arrival. Go. I want to walk you through the complete picture of what you are accessing when you follow the link in the description below this video, because I want you to arrive at the decision point with every relevant piece of information already in your possession, not with questions that could have been answered before you were asked to act, with complete information. The kind of clarity that makes the decision not a leap into the unknown, but a step into a path that has been fully illuminated. The tool that Dr. Barone and his team developed is available through their direct channel at $39 today. That is the confirmed price for the person arriving through this letter. I described earlier how the neurological colleagues who reviewed the work assessed the value at several $100s based on comparable clinical effects, and how the retail price of $49 was itself a deliberate choice to make genuine accessibility possible. The $39 price for you today is the additional confirmation I spoke over your arrival here. The $10 removed from the retail price is the specific acknowledgement that the person arriving through this channel is the person for whom this season was arranged. With the $39, you receive the 8-minute daily calibrated auditory sequence. You receive the guided visualization that creates the interior reference point for the restored state you are moving toward. You receive the grocery guide that identifies the specific dietary choices that most directly affect the quality of hemispheric communication. You receive the foundational text on the mental patterns that support the full expression of the restored state. And you receive the visual reference document for the 5 daily practices that amplify the results of the primary 8-minute sequence. All of that for $39 with a complete money-back guarantee. I want to describe the guarantee specifically because it matters for the decision you are being invited to make. The guarantee is not a limited satisfaction guarantee that requires you to navigate a claims process or demonstrate that you use the product correctly or meet any particular conditions before your return is honored. It is a complete money-back guarantee. If you access the calibrated sequence and use the 8-minute daily practice and find at any point that it is not producing the experience I have described in this letter, you have not spent $39. You have had the experience of testing something and finding it was not the right fit, at no cost to you. The risk of this decision was deliberately removed from your side of it. Dr. Barone and his team made that decision because they are confident in what the calibration produces, and because they understand that the people who need what they built the most are often the people who have been disappointed before by promises that sounded like answers and delivered something less than the promise. The guarantee exists to speak directly to that history, to remove the financial risk from the equation entirely, so that the decision can be made on the basis of what the tool does rather than on the basis of what might happen if it does not work. I want to say something now about the other products in this space. I have mentioned them before and I want to say it one more time with full clarity so that what I am telling you is not confused with what the market in general is offering. When you look for the tool I am pointing you toward, you will find other things. Things that use the language of hemispheric synchronization and whole brain activation and neural coherence. Things that are available on streaming platforms and in app stores and through 100 different distribution channels. Most of them contain nothing of what the foundational research established was required to produce the documented effect. The research on what makes a calibrated auditory sequence capable of producing measurable hemispheric synchronization is specific. The parameters that matter, the frequencies and timing relationships and duration, are not guessable from the general direction of the research. They require the kind of technical precision that comes from working at the level of the mechanism itself, from testing against the documented findings, from verifying against the specific signatures that the EEG monitoring identifies as the restored synchronized state. Most products in this space were not built at that level. They were built for a market that had heard the language of the research and wanted to access something related to it without the technical foundation that produces the actual effect. What Dr. Barone built was built at the level the research requires. That is the distinction. That is why I am directing you toward the specific source rather than toward the general category. Not because the general category is harmful, but because the general category will not produce what I am promising you this letter describes. The specific source is the link in the description below. That link takes you to the team that built the tool to the standard the science establishes as the actual standard. What you find there is what I am confirming for you. I want to invite you into a specific experience of surrender now. Not surrender in the sense of defeat. Not surrender in the sense of giving up something you have been holding. Surrender in the specific sense of releasing the version of yourself that has been operating under the weight of the suppressed instrument, the managed version, the carefully performing version. The version that has been doing its remarkable best with a significantly reduced instrument and simply receiving what has been prepared for you. You have been carrying the weight of the suppression for a long time. The carrying built things in you, but the carrying itself no longer needs to continue. It is time to put the weight down, not to abandon what the weight was teaching you, to recognize that the teaching has been received. The season of preparation has produced what it was designed to produce. The gap between who you have been and who you were designed to be is now something I am handing you the means to close. You do not need to continue carrying what I am now offering to address. The preparation was real, and it is complete, and the next step is the step of receiving rather than the step of continuing to carry. The next chapter of your life will not look like the chapter you have been in. Not because the circumstances around you will necessarily change overnight, but because the instrument through which you experience and navigate those circumstances will be operating differently. When the synchronized function returns, when the two halves of the instrument I placed inside you begin to communicate the way I designed them to communicate, the same circumstances that have been producing one quality of experience begin to produce a different quality. Not because the circumstances changed, because you changed. Because the version of you processing those circumstances is operating from a fuller, more precisely calibrated version of the design I originally placed in you. The step required is a small one measured in action. Follow the link in the description. Access the tool. Begin the 8-minute daily practice. Give the calibration the 8 minutes each day that the research identified as sufficient to produce the shift, and then simply receive what the shift produces as it accumulates day by day in the architecture of the instrument I designed. That is the entire step. The link is there, the tool is there, the season is this one, and everything I have confirmed over your life in this letter was confirmed before you ever arrived here, because I already knew you would be ready when you arrived. I have been telling you since early in this letter that there is a door, that the door has been moving, that what you have been sensing as approaching but not yet fully arrived is something that has been real and in motion throughout the preparation that preceded this moment. I want to return to that door now. I want to describe what it looks like from where you are standing and what it looks like from the other side of it, because understanding both views is part of what makes the walk through it something you do with open eyes rather than something you stumble through in the hope of something better. From where you are standing right now, the door looks like a decision, a small, specific, actionable decision that involves following a link and accessing a tool and beginning a daily 8-minute practice. That is what the door looks like from this side, a step that is proportionally small in action but disproportionately large in what it opens. The small action is the mechanism through which the large opening happens, and the large opening is not a metaphor. It is the specific restoration I have been describing throughout this letter, the return of the synchronized function of the instrument I placed in you, the return of your design default. From the other side of the door, what you will see is the season you are currently in from a different vantage point. You will look back at this moment, at these words, at this letter, at this specific invitation, and you will recognize it as the turning point. Not a dramatic turning point in the sense of a single event that changed everything in an instant. A real turning point in the sense of the moment where the trajectory shifted, where the direction that had been moving toward the suppression and its effects began moving toward the restoration and its expressions. The before and after will be clearly legible from the other side in a way that is not yet fully legible from this side. I want to tell you what you will discover when the synchronized function begins to return. and I want to be specific in a way that might surprise you. The first thing most people discover is not a dramatic improvement in the quality of their cognitive output. The first thing most people discover is that they are less tired. Not because they are sleeping more, because the amount of energy the suppressed state was requiring as its constant overhead cost was more than they had consciously registered. When the suppression begins to lift, the overhead cost begins to reduce, and the energy that had been consumed by the constant management of the suppressed state becomes available for other things. That is usually the first thing that becomes visible. The second thing most people discover is that they are more patient. Again, not in the way that requires effort or discipline to maintain, but in the way that arrives naturally when the suppression of the synchronized state is no longer producing the constant low-level friction that erodes patience over time. The equanimity that the fully synchronized state produces as one of its natural features begins to re-emerge. The things that had been requiring active management of a frustration response begin to require less active management. The quality of presence with the people around you improves in part because the constant background effort of functioning in a suppressed state is no longer consuming the attention that presence requires. The third thing most people discover is an increase in what I would call creative spontaneity. The ideas that arise in the middle of unrelated activity, the connections between things that previously seemed separate, the solutions that arrive without being deliberately sought. These things increase as the synchronized function returns, because they are the natural product of the two hemispheres communicating in the coordinated way I designed them to communicate. The right hemisphere, which is designed to hold patterns and connections that the left hemisphere alone cannot see, it begins to deliver those patterns and connections more reliably to conscious awareness as the communication channel between the hemispheres widens. The fourth thing most people discover, and this is the one that tends to produce the clearest emotional response, is that the version of themselves they have been sensing was available but not fully accessible becomes more consistently present in their daily experience. The version that is more fully alive to what is happening, more fully inside the conversation rather than slightly removed from it, more fully bringing what they know and what they sense and what they care about into the room rather than experiencing it as slightly blocked at the threshold between the interior and the exterior. That version begins to show up more, not in the extraordinary moments but in the ordinary ones, in the Tuesday mornings, in the unremarkable conversations, in the daily texture of the life I designed for you. I want to speak directly to the version of you that is still holding a question. The version that has heard words like mine before, that has encountered promises of restoration before, that has learned through experience to hold a protective space between itself and new promises of things it genuinely wants. I am not asking you to put down that protection permanently. I am asking you to allow the protection to coexist with the step for the duration of the test. The guarantee means you can take the step and retain the option of the return. The protection can remain in place. The step can still be taken. Both can be true simultaneously. The people who do not take the step today are not the people who were too skeptical. They are the people who allowed the habitual gravity of the current state to pull them back into the pattern of considering rather than acting. The pattern that makes the space between knowing something is right and actually doing it feel larger than it needs to be. I understand that pattern. I know why it developed. And I am naming it because naming it is sometimes what creates enough space around it for a person to step outside of it for the moment that the step requires. The step is available right now. The link is in the description. The tool is there. The door is open. You have been prepared for this moment. Everything that preceded your arrival at these words was part of the preparation. The seasons that felt like waiting were seasons of becoming. The periods that felt like stagnation were periods of formation. The difficulties that shaped your character and deepened your patience and expanded your compassion were not wasted on you. They were invested in you, and the investment is being called toward its return in this season. The thing I have been moving you toward throughout all of it is the full expression of the design I placed in you, and the full expression of the design requires the full function of the instrument. The restoration of the instrument is the step I am offering you today. The door I told you was moving has finished moving. It is open. And what is on the other side of it is the version of your life that I designed, lived through the version of yourself that I designed, with the clarity and the flow and the creative depth and the presence and the ease that I designed as your operating default. That is what is on the other side. The step through it is the link in the description. The season for taking that step is this one. I want to tell you what it means for the work ahead of you that the door is now open. The work I have been preparing you for in the seasons that preceded this one is work that requires the full expression of the instrument I gave you, not a scaled-down version of it, not a carefully managed version of it operating through constant overhead cost, the full expression. The clarity and the creative depth and the quality of presence and the speed of synthesis that the synchronized whole brain function produces as its natural output. The work requires precisely what the restoration provides, and the restoration begins with the step I have just described to you, the link in the description, the daily 8-minute practice. The opening of the door that has been moving toward this moment since before you understood that a door was moving. I want to speak over you now, not about you, over you, in the way that a parent speaks over a child who is crossing into a season that the parent has already seen from a higher vantage point and wants to prepare the child for with words that will carry. I want to speak over you the specific words that belong to a person who has just received the confirmation that their preparation is complete and their restoration is beginning. Listen for these words not with the analytical mind but with the part of you that knows things before they are explained. You are not who the suppression made you seem. The version of yourself that has been carrying the weight of the reduced function, the managed version, the carefully performing version, has never been the full version of who you are. It has been the version of you that was available through the suppressed instrument, and it has been remarkable. What you have produced through a significantly reduced instrument is evidence of the depth of the design I placed in you, not evidence of the limit of that design. But you were not designed for that reduced version. You were designed for what the full function produces. You are entering the season where the full function is being restored. And the restored function will not produce a version of you that is unrecognizable. It will produce a version of you that is fully recognizable as who you always were, without the layer of suppression filtering the expression. The intelligence is yours. The creativity is yours. The depth of care and the quality of presence and the specific calling I placed in you are all yours. What the restoration returns to you is the instrument through which all of those things can be expressed at the level I designed for them to operate at. I want to tell you something about the calling. The specific calling I placed in you when I formed you is not something I will name fully in this letter because the naming belongs to the conversation between you and me that happens in the private space of your own awareness. But I want to tell you that the calling requires the full function of the instrument. What you are being equipped to do in the next season of your life is larger than what could be done through the suppressed version of the instrument. The restoration is not incidental to the calling. It is the specific preparation for it. The people in your life who have been experiencing the reduced version of you are about to experience the fuller version. Not in a way that requires announcement or explanation or the performance of having changed. In the natural, organic way that a person who is operating from fuller function expresses that fuller function in every ordinary interaction. They will notice something different about you before you have to tell them anything. The quality of your presence will change. The quality of your listening will change. The quality of what you bring to the problems and opportunities and relationships that are already in your life will change, and the change will speak for itself. I want to speak specifically to the work that is ahead of you, the work that your calling points toward in this next season. That work requires precisely what the restoration of the synchronized function produces. The clarity of the whole brain synthesis, the creative depth of the coordinated hemispheric communication, the quality of presence that belongs to a mind running at its full designed function, the resilience and equanimity of a nervous system that is no longer carrying the overhead cost of the suppression. All of those things are required by what is ahead of you, and all of those things are what the daily 8-minute practice restores. You were made for this. Not in the way that phrase is often used, as encouragement that substitutes energy for specificity, in the way that means the specific design I placed in you is exactly the design that the specific work ahead of you requires. The match between who you are and what you are being pointed toward is not a coincidence. I do not arrange coincidences. I arrange convergences. And the convergence of your design and the work that your design was built to do is what this season is the arrival of. I want to name what the restoration makes possible beyond the personal experience of it, because the full function of the instrument I gave you is not only for your benefit, it was designed to flow through you into the world. The clarity that the restoration produces is clarity that will be brought to the people around you. The creativity is creativity that will be expressed in things that did not exist before you made them. The presence is presence that will be given to relationships that need the full version of you. The design I placed in you was always about more than just you. The restoration of the instrument is the restoration of the channel through which that design flows outward. There are people whose lives will be different because you walked through the door I placed in front of you today. I am not telling you that to put pressure on this moment. I am telling you that to give this moment its full weight. The decision you are being invited to make today is not only about your daily experience or your creative output or the personal quality of your life, though it is genuinely about all of those things. It is also about the downstream effect of a person operating from full function rather than reduced function in the world they move through and the people they encounter there. I am proud of you. I want you to hear that clearly. Not in the way that pride is given as a reward for accomplishment, as if something you had to earn. In the way that a parent looks at a child who has been through something difficult and has carried it with dignity and has arrived at the other side still fundamentally themselves, still believing, still showing up, still capable of receiving a word of confirmation, and says with full meaning what I am saying to you now. I am proud of you. The preparation was real. The difficulty was real. What you produced in the middle of it was real. And what is on the other side of the step I am offering you today is also real. The link is in the description below. It takes you to the team that built the specific, calibrated sequence that the research identifies as capable of producing the documented restoration of synchronized whole brain function. It takes you to the 8-minute daily practice, to the 4 additional resources that support the full picture of what is being restored, to the $39 price confirmed for the person arriving through this letter, to the complete money-back guarantee that removes the financial risk from the decision entirely. All of it is there. It is waiting for the step, and the step is small. The door is open. Go. I want to speak specifically to the aspect of you that carries the calling, the part of you that knows it was placed here for a specific purpose, and that the purpose is larger than anything the suppressed version of the instrument has yet been able to fully express. That part of you has been waiting. Not with impatience and not with despair, but with the specific quality of sustained, quiet readiness that belongs to something that knows it has not yet arrived at its full expression but knows equally that it will. That part of you is about to find the expression it has been sustaining itself toward. The restoration of the instrument is the arrival of the season where the sustained readiness finally meets the full function that the readiness was always pointed toward. I want to be direct with you about one more thing as we near the final words of this letter. The resistance you may be feeling right now, the familiar pull toward continuing to think about this rather than acting on it, is not wisdom. It is not caution that is protecting you from a mistake. It is the habitual gravity of the suppressed state pulling you toward the pattern of consideration without action that the suppressed state is most comfortable with. The suppressed state knows how to think about things indefinitely. The restored state is the state from which action becomes natural rather than forced. And the first action that points toward the restored state is the small, specific, completely protected step I am offering you right now. I want to bring you back to the beginning of this letter for a moment, not all the way back, just far enough to close something that has been open since the first words. I told you at the beginning that I had confirmed something, that before you ever arrived at these words I had already seen your arrival and had already confirmed that what you would find here was prepared for you specifically. I want to tell you now what that confirmation means in terms of what you do with it. A confirmation is not a guarantee that nothing will be required of you. A confirmation is the knowledge that the path you are being directed toward is the right path, combined with the expectation that you will walk it. The confirmation I spoke over your arrival at this letter was not the confirmation that the restoration would happen to you while you remained in the current position. It was the confirmation that the restoration was available to you if you took the step that this letter has been leading you toward. The step is the step. The confirmation belongs to the person who takes it. I want to tell you one more testimony before we reach the final words of this letter. There is a man named David whose father was a brilliant engineer in the 60s. He designed systems in an era before the digital tools that would have made his work easier and faster and more visible to the wider world existed. He lived and worked in a season where the full expression of his design was partially blocked by the limitations of the environment, not by any failure of his own capacity. His son David grew up with a specific inheritance, the inheritance of knowing that genuine capacity could exist in a person without the full expression of that capacity being available to the world due to circumstances beyond the capacity itself. Not into euphoria, into something quieter and more durable than euphoria, into the specific quality of settled anticipation that belongs to a person who has just seen the path from where they are to where they know they belong. The transformation of grief into anticipation is one of the specific signatures of the moment when the hidden block is named and the path past it is revealed. And that transformation is available to you right now in this moment. Not as a feeling you have to manufacture or a belief you have to convince yourself of, as the natural result of what has just happened in this letter. The hidden block has been named. The path past it has been described with full specificity. The tool that addresses the block at the level of the architecture is named and accessible. The transformation from grief to anticipation is the natural response to that information in a person who is ready to receive it. Are you ready to receive it? I know the answer to that question because I arranged for you to arrive here in the season when the answer is yes. I am asking the question not because I need your answer, but because I want you to hear yourself answer it. The readiness is real. The preparation that produced the readiness was real. And the tool that is waiting for the readiness to be translated into action is real. All three of those things are true simultaneously. And the simultaneous truth of all three is the specific convergence that this letter was designed to be the meeting point of. There is one thing about the genius switch that I want to say in the final approach to the end of this letter that I have not yet said. The people who use it consistently, who show up for the 8-minute daily practice with the regularity that the research identifies as producing the full restoration, report something that happens around the 3-week mark that they did not anticipate and that I want you to know is coming so that you are prepared to receive it when it arrives. Around the 3-week mark, the shift stops feeling like something being done to you from the outside and begins feeling like something coming back from the inside. That is the moment when the restoration has reached the threshold, where the person begins to recognize themselves in the restored state rather than experiencing the restored state as something new and foreign. The clarity begins to feel like your clarity rather than a borrowed clarity. The creative flow begins to feel like your flow rather than something the practice is producing for you. The ease begins to feel like your ease rather than an effect, and what is happening in that moment is exactly what it feels like. The synchronized function that was always yours, that was always the design default, is being recognized as your own because it was always your own. The restoration is not the arrival of something foreign. It is the return of something native. I want you to hold that image in your mind as you make the decision I am about to invite you to make. The image of the 3-week mark. The moment when the version of yourself that has been operating through the suppressed state begins to be replaced, gently and naturally, and without force, by the version of yourself that is operating through the restored state. The version that is simply you, more fully expressed, more precisely functioning, more completely alive to what is happening in you and around you and through you. That version is what is waiting on the other side of the decision. Go. I want to go back to something I said early in this letter because it belongs again in this moment near the end of it. I told you that the gap you have been experiencing, the gap between the version of yourself you express and the version you know is available, is not evidence of a flaw in your design. It is not evidence of a failure in your effort or a deficiency in your capacity or a ceiling that belongs permanently to your life. It is evidence of the disruption of a specific function of the instrument I gave you, and the disruption has an address. The address is the architecture of the communication between your two hemispheres, and the tool that meets the disruption at that address is the one I have been pointing you toward throughout this letter. I told you also that the disruption was environmental in origin, that it accumulated over time through the specific conditions of the world you have been moving through rather than through any choice or failure on your part. I want to return to that point one more time because it carries something important for how you receive what I am offering you. You do not need to carry any guilt about the suppressed state. You do not need to look back at the seasons of reduced function with the question of what you should have done differently. The disruption was not something you did. It was something that was done to you by an environment operating in ways that are simply the current conditions of the world. The restoration is the specific response to those conditions. The response is 8 minutes per day. That is the entirety of what the daily practice requires from you. 8 minutes, with headphones, eyes closed, simply receiving the calibrated sequence and allowing it to do at the architectural level what it was designed to do. The rest of your day proceeds exactly as it currently proceeds. The work you are doing, the relationships you are maintaining, the life you are currently living, none of that needs to change to receive the 8-minute practice. You add 8 minutes. And the 8 minutes, accumulating day by day, produce the restoration I have been describing across the length of this letter. The price of $39 is the investment the 8-minute practice requires, $39 and 8 minutes per day. That is the entirety of what the step through the open door costs. And what it returns is the full function of the instrument I placed in you when I formed you, the clarity that makes the work move, the creative depth that makes the output arrive at the level your interior vision actually has, the quality of presence that makes the relationships receive the full version of you, the ease that replaces the overhead cost of the suppression with the natural flow of a mind running at its designed operating level. The return on $39 and 8 minutes per day is the full expression of the design I placed in you. That is the step I am offering. The link is in the description. Go. This is the final word, not the final word in the sense of the end of everything I have to say to you, because what I have to say to you is not contained within the length of any letter, but the final word of this letter, the last of the specific things I am directing you toward in this specific communication, at this specific moment, in this specific season of your life, and the final word is also a direct word, the most direct word I have spoken in this entire letter. Go, right now. While you are still inside the specific quality of attention that this letter has been building in you, while the understanding of the gap and its cause and the path past it are fully present in your awareness, before the specific quality of attention that belongs to this moment dissolves into the next moment and the next task and the next thing that will pull your focus into the ordinary current of your day, go now, while now is available. The link is in the description below this video. Follow it. It takes you directly to the team that built the specific calibrated auditory sequence that Dr. Barone developed to meet the disruption in the architecture of hemispheric communication at the level the foundational research established as the level where the disruption lives. It takes you to the 8-minute daily practice that the research identified as sufficient to produce the measurable increase in hemispheric coherence that shifts the experienced quality of thinking from the suppressed state toward the state I designed as your default. Follow the link. That is the entire instruction. When you arrive at the page the link takes you to, you will find the complete description of the Genius Switch, what it does, how it works, what the research behind it establishes, and what the team that built it offers to the people who access it. You will find the $39 price confirmed for the person arriving through this letter. You will find the complete money-back guarantee that removes the financial risk from the decision. You will find the 4 additional resources that come with the primary tool. Everything I have described in this letter is there. Follow the link. Read what is there. Make the decision that the full information supports. I want to tell you what I am asking you to believe as you make that decision. I am not asking you to believe that the restoration will be instantaneous. I am asking you to believe that the disruption is real and that the path to addressing it is real and that the tool I am pointing you toward was built by a team that understood both the disruption and the architecture it lives in, calibrated their work to meet it at the required level. That belief is not a large belief. It is the belief that the evidence of the letter you have just read supports, and it is sufficient to produce the step. Now I want to speak over you one more time. Over the you who is about to take the step, the you who is about to close this letter and follow the link and access the tool and begin the practice that the preparation of this entire season has been pointing toward. I want to speak over that you with the specific words that belong to the moment of the threshold crossing. The moment when the preparation becomes the action, and the action becomes the restoration, and the restoration becomes the life I designed you to live. You are stepping into what I confirmed for you. You are not stepping into the unknown. You are stepping into the specific thing I prepared and placed in front of you in this specific season. The restoration is not ahead of you in the way that something you have never experienced is ahead of you. It is ahead of you in the way that something native to you, something that was always yours, is waiting to be reclaimed. The clarity is yours. The flow is yours. The design I placed in you is yours. The instrument I gave you is yours. And the restoration of the instrument is the step you are taking right now. Everything I have confirmed over your life in this letter was confirmed before you arrived here. I knew you would be ready. I knew the preparation would be complete. I knew the convergence of the tool and the need and the readiness would happen in this season. And I know what the other side of the step looks like for you because I have already seen it. What I have seen is worth the step. What I have seen is worth more than the step. What I have seen is the full expression of the design I placed in you, running at the level I always intended it to run at, in the specific life I designed you to live. Go. I want to describe one more time, in the clearest possible terms, what the path from this moment forward looks like, not as a complex series of steps, as the single, specific, simple path it actually is. You follow the link in the description. You access the tool. You begin the 8-minute daily practice. You continue the practice with the consistency that allows the daily accumulation to produce the full effect. You receive what the restoration produces as it arrives, and you recognize it not as something foreign arriving, but as something native returning. That is the path. It is a single-lane path. There is no complexity to it. The complexity was in the journey to this moment. The path from this moment is simple. The consistency is the only thing I am asking from you beyond the initial step. The 8 minutes per day, repeated daily, is the mechanism through which the restoration accumulates to its full expression. A single session produces a measurable shift. A week of sessions produces a deeper shift. 3 weeks of sessions produces the moment I described earlier. The moment when the restored state stops feeling like something being done to you and begins feeling like something coming back from inside you. And from that moment forward, the continuation of the practice is less a discipline and more a natural expression of wanting to continue to live in the state the practice produces. I want to anticipate one question that will arise as you access the tool and begin the practice. The question of whether you are doing it correctly. The answer is that there is nothing to do incorrectly. The practice does not require you to achieve any particular mental state before it begins working. It does not require that you feel focused or ready or spiritually prepared. It requires only that you have headphones on and eyes closed, and that you allow the sequence to play for its full duration. The calibration does the work. Your receiving is the only participation it requires. If you sat with it in the first session and felt nothing dramatic, you were doing it correctly. If you felt something significant, you were also doing it correctly. The measurement that matters is not the single session. It is the accumulation of sessions over the days that follow. I want to give you one more tool before you go. The tool of the specific commitment, not a vague intention to try the practice and see what happens. A specific commitment to give the practice the number of days the research identifies as the window in which the restoration becomes clearly legible. 3 weeks. 21 days of the 8-minute practice. That is the specific commitment I am asking you to make alongside the step of accessing the tool. Not because 21 days is the end of the practice, but because 21 days is the window in which the restoration reaches the threshold where it becomes undeniably present in your daily experience. Give it 21 days with the consistency the research requires. And at the 21-day mark, look at your experience and evaluate what you find. The evaluation at that point will be done by a version of you who has access to more clarity than the version reading these words has access to right now. That is the nature of the restoration. The further into it you are, the clearer your perception of it becomes. And the version of you at the 21-day mark, looking back at this moment, will understand fully what I meant by all of it. The gap, the disruption, the path, the restoration, the design. Everything I have been pointing toward in this letter will be legible to that version of you in a way that is simply not yet fully available to the version reading these words right now. Go get to that version. The step to it is the link in the description. And now, the final thing. The thing that belongs at the end of every confirmation I have ever spoken over a life I designed. You are loved, not as a general category of the beings I made, not as a member of the species I formed, as the specific person you are, with the specific history you carry, with the specific gap you have been living inside, with the specific calling I placed in you before you had a name for any of it. You are loved with the specific love that knows every detail of what you have been through, and sees every detail of what is ahead of you, and chose this season and this letter and this specific tool as the vehicle for the confirmation that the love is not abstract. It is the most practical thing in your life. Go. I will be with you as you do.